All right, go ahead and get started. This is our Planning Commission public hearing for May 14th. Can I start with roll call, please?
AJ Summers,
Calais Cruz.
Rich Levy.
Brian Adams.
Luchator,
Jonathan Hayek.
Let's see, before we begin with any agenda items, is anybody here who would like to give us public comment on something not on tonight's agenda? Great, come on down. If you give us your name and address and try and keep your comments to 3 minutes.
Hi, my name is Greg Kohler, and I'm the owner and operator of the Rabbit Ears Motel here in town. I know you have a big thing on your agenda tonight, but the reason I'm here is the Natural Grocers Project is coming up on May 21st. And I just wanted to put in a few comments about the projects that's going to be coming up for review. The building itself is going to be built right up to the lot lines, and it's going to seriously impact the visibility of my sign coming from the west. And I was hoping to see if there's going to be any possibility of some leniency or moving the setbacks back from the sidewalk so that it's not going to be completely blocked. It's historically designated and has some preservation with the city, county, and state. Whether that matters or not, I don't know, but I know I'm ahead of schedule on it, but I just wanted you to think about it because the sign is an important part of the community. I've had several people come in for defense of the sign, and you'll be hearing about them at the May 21st meeting. But basically, I'm just wondering if you could think about moving the lot line back maybe 6 to 8 feet so that when you're coming from the west, you'll be able to see the sign and it won't be completely blocked. So that's basically why I'm here tonight. I'm not opposed to the Natural Grocers Project. It's a nice building. It looks like it's well planned and well thought out. I hope they have enough parking because certainly parking is becoming more and more of a concern. They show 35 spaces. According to the things I read about online, a grocery store should have about 45 spaces for 15,000 square feet. But anyway, that's just a sidebar, but I'm mainly here concerned about the visibility of my sign. And if you guys would give it some thought, and maybe when you're driving from the west and you're looking down at the sign and think of a big building sitting right there on the sidewalk, it's going to significantly impact the visibility of the sign. So thanks for your time.
All right, thank you for your comments. Would anybody else like to give us public comment on something not on tonight's agenda? All right, great. Then we'll go into our agenda items. Our first one this evening is, say it correctly for the record, this is PL 2025-0339, 12th and Yampa Residences. So this has been remanded back to us. I know we've reviewed this before. We're going to treat it, I guess, as much as a brand new project as the applicant would like to treat it as. So feel free and elaborate on anything. You don't have to just tailor down to only a summation or anything. Just kind of wanted to add that. But yeah, if the applicant is ready for a presentation.
Hey, Brian, before we get started, I need to recuse myself. My firm is on the design team.
Great. Thank you, AJ.
Hi, thanks for hearing us again, I guess. I'm Sarah, I'm with Vertical Arts, and I'm gonna do a run through. It's gonna be a little balance of a refresh, just because I know we have some new council members and some people weren't here, and then just focus on moving forward. So that's a little tidbit on the cover. I assume you've seen the packet that Toby put together, but I just want to brief synopsis. We're here at 12th and Yampa. We have Waterside next to us. Little Toots is across the park. And then to the north of us is 1125 Lincoln, where JSM's current office is, future developable parcel next to them. And then it's obviously the terminus of Yampa as 12th wraps around and faces the Yampa River and the park. So to just summarize the program, the purple are Our residential components, our primary residential entry faces Little Toots off 12th. We've got 8 residential units and a rooftop deck above. Then we have a generous restaurant that wraps the corner, so the entirety of the Yampa Street facade, as well as like 30% of 12th Street, is dedicated to the restaurant space. And then the red area is our covered enclosed parking garage, which is almost 50%, 40% of that main ground level is our enclosed parking garage. And then just past that, the gray strip is the alley, just for reference. So we showed this slide last time just to give some context to the other similar projects that are currently on Yampa or being built right now. 2 of those, obviously. Olympian, Waterside is directly next to us. Howelson Place, the Emerald is just a couple blocks down. This is kind of the character of some similar buildings in our zone district. But I also wanted to talk about how we got to where we were on our existing design that we're presenting to you. So we thought a lot about the historic context of wider Steamboat. I think in council, it came up with some public comment and like, what is this character and soul of Steamboat and how are we really trying to relate to that? And I know this is a larger development that isn't, double Z or whatever, it's hard to compete with history, but we really wanted to be conscientious about these things that make our downtown so special. Masonry elements are super important. There's a lot of old buildings currently existing or from the past with these corbelling elements. We were inspired by the barn latticing and the wood materials. And so we really tried to incorporate that into our building. The CDC specifies, we want to complement the traditional character and encourage those contemporary uses. So we're trying to kind of meld in the middle here. We have our significant, stone masses with big timber headers to make them feel authentic and real, timber latticing screens that reference those barns. We've got these Western motif pieces that can be, a nod to some traditional buildings downtown with the filigrees. And the timber patterning that we did on the roof kind of deck areas was a nod to some of those original corbelling and that kind of character as it steps on the crowns of the buildings. Wrapping around, you can kind of see that in more detail, how we've tried to create this ins and outs, these vertical timber elements along the facade with the punctuated glazing. It references those older storefronts, kind of similar to like the Lions building and things like that. And so we really wanted to be complementary to the past of Steamboat while still, proposing a new building. So these are some of the materials we're proposing: real stone, again, the Western motif panels, wood and timber materials, screen latticing and metal. So it's kind of just this, reference of history with modern aesthetic. This is a view of the Yampa Street outdoor patio and the entrance to the restaurant. So up those steps, that's our generous kind of outdoor seating area before you go into the restaurant off of Yampa Street. And then you'll see some of the modifications we made at the corner that I'll go to in more detail in a minute. And then wrapping around 12th again, you can see the screen elements here where we screen the parking garage, and then that residential entry is under the covered entryway as well as an ADA ramp at the end near Yampa. So in moving forward, obviously we're here to also discuss the variances we're asking for. And the CDC, is the governing codified document, but it also references the community plan and the downtown plan that guide the direction we want our community to go. So those are guiding documents that are specifically referenced in the CDC. And, we utilize those in some of our variance, asks, I would say. But that's just one criteria for approval for the variances. We've been working on this project for like 2 years, and specifically with the city for at least 6 months, going back and forth, because we have to meet all those criteria for approval. And this variance 719.d is part of the codified code and is a means for us to ask for variances from you and council and the community. Because we as architects and designers and community members know not everything fits into, a simple box. And so we also have to make sure it's not going to adversely impact the legal conforming uses, number one. And then number three is we have to meet the acceptable alternative standard. So for every variance we're asking for, we've met all three of those. And Toby, I think, describes that in more detail in her narrative. But this has been a really thoughtful process with the staff to come to you with a project that they support and can be approved with our current codified code and the variance criteria for approval. So, but we did hear, we heard from you, we heard from council, we heard from the public, and we've made a concerted effort to come back to you with a refined, improved project that has some significant changes. Number one, Councilman Adams, we heard from you. It just seemed like 5% too big, or just a little too big. And we took that to heart. We reduced our FAR by 9%. We were able to eliminate 3 variances, 2 of which relate directly to massing. The lot coverage is removed and the plate height variance. I know that was a comment specifically from this group that the plate height just felt unnecessary. So we took that to heart. We also increased the glazing at the corner. You can see that in the lower image. And we're able to reduce or remove that variance entirely, and really felt that that was, a big connection to the park. That was some of the comments from the public. And I'll get into that area a little bit more as I move on. For the lot coverage, you can see we were originally at 95%, and we were able to move it down to 84%, removing the variance. And I think the alley and the way that building interacts mass-wise is significantly reduced, and we were able to get rid of that lot coverage variance. For the FAR, again, we reduced it by almost 10%, 9%, 9.5. And again, I just want to reiterate, we're specifically asking for the FAR variance to exempt our above grade structured parking per a specific recommendation at the downtown plan. If we were not having to include that covered structured parking, we would be well below it, 194. So we lowered our FAR, but we still are going to have to ask for that variance because of the structured parking. To highlight a little bit of the corner changes, you can see here we reduced our building height by 18 inches, which helps lower the mass at that corner. Additionally, we felt like some refinement of that stone masonry element would be an improvement. So in pulling down that parapet height and adding the glass railing, we were really able to visually decrease the mass as well. And then really, carried across the full glazing and pulled it all the way down the farthest we can. So that glazing is at the floor level inside now. And then a third element I think that really helps with that pedestrian environment is the awnings. We carried those awnings all the way around the corner, you can see, which kind of brings down the scale of the building. Additionally, over by the the ADA ramp here, you can kind of see this is a minor thing, but we previously had carried that slat element over, which we felt seemed a little, like a wall. So we removed that piece and brought those windows down as well. So now that just becomes much more transparent and inviting at that critical juncture at the end of Yampa. So the height changes. We're still asking for a height variance, even though we lowered the building 18 inches. We are asking for a height variance because of the floodplain. So at that lowest corner here, it raises our building. We set that the absolute minimum, which is 1 foot above the 100-year floodplain. And so that inherently raises our building about 4 feet. If we could pull the building down to that corner, if there wasn't the floodplain there, we would be well under the height limit. So the actual mass of our floor to floors and the building, we would be, at 36 feet at our highest point. And so, we really listened to you and tried to reduce that mass, getting rid of the plate height, but we're still asking for, that 2-foot variance. And again, just to, look at the larger picture, the community canvas plan recommends an average height of 45 feet downtown. And we're actually lower than Waterside now at that adjacent roof. We're not asking for something that's going to be towering over the adjacent neighbor. We're right in line here. It's really just this bottom corner where the sidewalk goes down so far that pushes our height over. And so we think that we've been really thoughtful to tie into that adjacent building's mass and are asking, for this 2 feet to accommodate the FEMA floodplain issue. And you can kind of see here at the bottom, that's that 4 foot, that red little wedge there. But from our floor height to that front roof is only 35.9, well below, the 38 in terms of like the mass of what we're proposing as the building. We're just having to push it up a little bit to get out of that floodplain. And now in talking about the setbacks, to start, the community plan does think that the direction for this area is to have 0 or very small setbacks from the lot line to maximize lot coverage and facilitate the walkable built environment. That's like copied directly from the community plan. So that's a bigger long-term goal. And we were really trying to create a building that has varied step backs that creates this, welcoming environment that's not overimposing, but we are asking for a 0 setback. That doesn't mean that the entirety of our building is 0 setback. So you can see in this plan at the bottom, 44% of the middle of Yampa Street is an outdoor patio. We have it punctuated with that railing due to the change in grade, but that's open air, that's open to look into. And we really felt that it was imperative to align with Waterside next to us to create the street frontage. And then, the CDC also recommends your, special features like corners and tower forms at the corner can be considered. And we feel like this terminus of Yampa deserves, an element there that's important. And I think the improvements on the corner actually do a better job at, kind of capping the end of that street. And so you can kind of see here, like the 2 street levels, how we're aligning with Waterside. And this is kind of a special area of Yampa because it's 18 feet wide at the sidewalk there. So I feel like Waterside feels set back because of how their landscape standards were done before the new ones. But it's not like imposing on you because it's a very generous sidewalk right there. And we're right in line with them. And you'll still see right down Yampa straight into the park. We're not coming out in front of them. I think there's been some misconception about that. And then as you wrap around 12th, we kept the corner element and then punctuated in the middle there with the ramp back 10 feet, the 17-foot entry. And then, along the parking garage, we were unable to step it back, but that's where we utilize the screening and the semi-transparency to not make it feel so imposing. Additionally, crafting like the second floor decks to punctuate a taller mass that might be at that street frontage. So in summary, we do still have variances. The FAR we feel is largely due to the covered parking. The setbacks, although are an ask, we feel like we've punctuated the building in a variety of ways that don't fit the letter of the code, but we're maintaining an active street front. We're following the direction of the community plan. The height we were able to reduce, but are still asking due to the floodplain for a 2-foot variance. And then 2 of the variances I didn't really include because in a slide, because they're more of a technicality that we talked about last time. The east glazing is because we're pushed up directly next to Waterside and can't have glass there. So we have to ask for a variance. And then the 25-foot increments, because our lot is 120 foot, 25 feet wide, like it's impossible to meet that to the letter of the law. We can go into that further, but I didn't want to use as much time on those. And then we did remove those 3 key variances: lot coverage, plate height, and west glazing. So I just want to finish by saying, there's the code. We've worked so hard with planning, and like the approval of this building is fully justified by the existing CDC. We've met all the variance criteria. We fit with the direction of the community plan. And, the variances exist to allow creative, different ways to think about things, but you still have to meet those criteria. And we feel like these changes, we hope you feel like we listen to you. We really take this to heart. I'm a local, I've been here 15 years, so I don't know if that counts. It's like the past is ever evolving, but we feel really passionate about creating a quality, unique product that can stand the test of time for this important corner. So that's kind of the spiel, and then we'll take your questions.
Great. Thank you very much. Yeah, we'll come back to you with questions. Toby, do you have a staff report for us as well?
Sure. Toby Stauffer, Senior Planner. So in addition to what Sarah has mentioned, The lot is zoned CY2. It's in the STR green zone and in the 100-year floodplain for the Yampa River. It's a 3-story mixed-use building with 8 residential units, a restaurant, enclosed parking. The project includes some streetscape improvements along 12th and Yampa streets. There are variances to overall height, setbacks, glazing, FAR, and building massing. There have been public comments provided in support and in opposition of the project. It was heard by Planning Commission on March 12th. It did not receive a recommendation and the vote was 2-2. On April 7th, City Council did remand this project back to Planning Commission with direction to provide more discussion and consideration for each of the variances related to mass and scale, review the cumulative impact of the variances together, and to provide a recommendation with more members present. The project does include variances that altogether lead to a larger building mass and scale, but we find that the project is consistent with the future plans for the area. It meets the development plan criteria for approval, and it has some characteristics that are similar to other downtown urban development. The height variance does provide an acceptable alternative. The development addresses flood prevention standards to elevate the building out of the floodplain. As was mentioned, the revised proposal has eliminated the average plate height variance. There are setback standards for CY, and CY development or development on Yampa Street has had many variances in PUDs. That leads to some variable building character and setback distance along the street. So there's not entirely a typical building character along Yampa Street. For this project, though, we find that the setback variances provide an acceptable alternative to the standards. The building design, as was indicated, does meet the intent of the standards without strict application in this circumstance. Regarding the FAR, the purpose of that standard is to reduce the mass and scale, allow some space for some pedestrian interaction and interest at the street level. The proposed design does include articulation, interest, and activity on both streets that mitigate the impacts of the scale and mass. The revised design also does eliminate the lot coverage variance and the west side glazing variance. We supported this project before and continue to support it. And that hasn't changed with the revised proposal. We did add one condition of approval to the project since the last Planning Commission meeting. It's condition number 14, and the applicant has agreed to that new condition.
Great. Thank you, Toby. Do we have any questions from commissioners to staff for the applicant?
Got a question for Toby. As I went through the notes and the meeting minutes from the last meeting, there's a lot of discussion about, the guidance documents versus the CDC. And what I'd like is your thinking in terms of which applies best.
Mm-hmm. When we created our recommendation, we relied on the plans for some guidance, and there is a criteria for approval in the variances that asks us, is this variance consistent with the plan? So in that regard, we looked at the plans for how this project and its variances comply, but our recommendation is based on the criteria for approval for a development plan and the variances. So the CDC applies. The plans are guiding documents. We are going to be in a tricky spot for a little while where our code is really kind of implementing some older plans, and there's going to be a disconnect for a bit. But these plans do provide us with some good guidance. But this project, our recommendation on this project is based on the criteria for approval and how the project meets it.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
I'll go for staff. There's a lot of discussion about the new area plan, talking about higher densities and even maybe greater heights. Do we have anything in the plan that says Yampa is supposed to have the same density and height as Main Street, as Lincoln, as our CO district?
We don't have anything that specific in the Canvas plan. However, all of those streets, Oak, Lincoln, and Yampa, I'm pretty sure all of those streets, I'm not sure if the downtown district is larger, but those 3 streets are within the downtown district, which does list those statements, maybe a potential 45-foot height, maybe some 0-foot setbacks. So, yeah.
But there's nothing that says we have to have one zone district for the downtown future land use plan, right? I assume that CY will still be a compatible zone district, even with some changes.
Yeah, there's nothing that says we have to have one zone district for a future land use district. I think our zone districts are divided by the characters of each of those streets, and though they're short, but something like dimensional standards or our zone districts could be something that changes with implementation of the direction in the plan.
Okay,
Any other questions?
another one. Zero setbacks. It seems like we also have discussion about activating the ground floor and even creating amenities for that space. You know, whether it's seating or landscaping, et cetera. How do those two things work together?
Yeah, I think we don't have any specific purpose statement or intent statement as to what are the setbacks for in the code. We have some other purpose statements and intent statements for different standards. But our thought is that the setback, it's a 10-foot setback on Yampa Street or in CY2, would be to provide some of those amenities and some pedestrian and some interactivity, especially on Yampa, as we know that that's our entertainment restaurant district street. So various buildings have complied with that standard over time. Some buildings are set back, some buildings are at zero, but they offer some amenity or interaction space. So how we looked at this building is that there are some amenities and some interactivity on both of those streets, 12th and Yampa, that provide an acceptable alternative for that variance.
Thank you.
To build on that real quick and stay on that topic, if that's all right. I'll just ask a quick question. Toby, so do you feel that Yampa Street, I read your staff analysis, especially on criteria 3 for that variance, and you say staff finds one purpose of the front setback is to allow space for pedestrian interaction and interest, which is kind of what you just elaborated on. Do you think that specifically on this corner of Yampa Street that staff's finding is that there is enough room on that corner for all of the pedestrian circulation or engagement or interest to happen, and that there won't be congestion instead?
Yeah, I think that Yampa Street in that section of the street has been redesigned. It is wider, as Sarah mentioned. There are really good sidewalks in that area. There is already a lot of activity that can happen in the public right-of-way. So I think the building at the corner shouldn't provide that congestion. When I reviewed this project with the applicant in preparation for this meeting, they did mention that by removing the stone on the corner of that building comes back about 2 feet. So they did add a little space there. So they actually have not a 0-foot setback at the actual corner. So I think that helps. And then I do think that the amenities that are provided, the walkways into the restaurant and into the building do allow some additional space and some interaction to happen in that area. So we didn't have a concern with congestion from the transition to public to private at that corner.
Perfect, thank you. I wanted to give you the chance to answer the same question, if you'd be interested.
Yeah, I mean, I think we feel similar. Like, honestly, before I started working on the project, I was surprised to find Waterside was right at 0 because it's pretty generous there. And obviously they have a little bit of different vibe going on with their landscaping and stuff than the current standards. But, you know, we wanted to create like that street frontage as a contiguous, you know, connected thing and not be stepped back against where Waterside's building was built, you know, presumably to accept another building if you've looked at the side of that building, right? And so we wanted to create that continuity, but we always knew we wanted to have that big, generous patio. And so just, you know, although we have to be slightly elevated above the sidewalk because of, you know, the restriction of the floodplain, in some ways we were thinking that that could be a benefit because you're able to see people up over the cars. And as you're walking, you know, they're looking down and they're engaging with you. When you're in the park, the elevated floor also kind of helps you connect across. And so visually, that step back at 14.5 and 20 is going to feel open, although we've got like a deck edge above it. we also really felt compelled to have those generous setbacks on the second floor intermittently to not only relieve the building, but to create activated spaces that people can fit furniture on and want to hang out in. And so it's like this connectivity to Yampa that's so important. And then like Toby said, with the redesign, not only visually lightening that corner, creating that awning that comes around, we did step that in, about 2 feet to kind of give a little relief as you come around onto 12th. So we feel like that sidewalk is plenty generous enough for the public to move and interact with the building. And with that 44% of our facade, whatever that is, it's like a pretty generous distance of our patio that it will feel like it kind of breathes into the street.
Thank you.
And if I could add one thing to that, the other thing that's through the city process is doing a revocable permit. So like a lot of the Yampa Street spaces, there's outdoor seating that's out there right along those sidewalks. And that's planned for the future of this development, is to engage with that as well. So there is a process to where we can not only be at that level of the existing patio space, but actually come down and interact more with pedestrians as they move by in that space.
Great, thank you. Lou, you were going to ask a question.
Yeah, Toby, what are the parking requirements for this development? And what is the actual parking?
I think that's in the packet. So there are 8 dwelling units. They require, I think, 17 spaces based on the number of bedrooms in those units. And then I think the restaurant, based on its square footage, requires 6 spaces, I believe. So this property is providing all of the required spaces that it needs for both the restaurant and the residential uses.
Thank you.
You've both kind of spoken to this a little bit, but maybe to both of you, if Toby, you wouldn't mind starting. You've mentioned that there are several buildings that have either minimal setbacks or 0 lot line setbacks. Do you have an idea of how many, how much is that actually already the character of Yampa?
I looked at a couple of buildings on Yampa. I can't say that I looked at all of them.
Sure.
But Waterside is at 0. 608 Yampa is at 0. That's being constructed right now. Hallison is at 10 feet on the Yampa side, and then because Hallison goes to the front, so it's 0 foot on the CO side. On the Lincoln side, the Olympian is at 0, and 10th and Yampa has 10-foot setback, so that's the one that's being constructed. So that's what I know of so far. So those are some similar buildings of mass and scale.
And I was actually looking at Hallison today, and the width of the sidewalk there is very similar to ours, although they're set back 10 feet on Yampa. I'm not sure if their lot line comes closer, but I was like, I feel like we're the same or more than what's currently at Hallison. And that, when you think about that generous patio and where their building faces, I think we're going to be really similar when you imagine like where our face of the building is relative to the curb, if that helps at all. Because I was thinking that too. And so I was looking at it.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Both of you.
Great, other questions? Yeah, Rich.
For Toby, we talk a lot about character. Are we only talking about the appearance of buildings when we talk about character? I'm pretty sure we have other.
I think the new plan has several different elements that talk about character. There are other things. There's density that's included in character. There's transportation and sort of what that character is, whether it's pedestrian character or a vehicular character in our different districts. So there are other things that we look at and consider. I think, again, looking at the guidance from the downtown plan and the Canvas plan, we're looking sort of at the downtown character, the downtown sort of mixed-use commercial character of those, the 3 commercial streets downtown generally.
Thank you. Great.
Any other questions? Toby, I have one for you regarding floor area ratio. So the conversation in the last 2 meetings that the applicant has already gone through for this has talked a lot about floor area with or without parking. I just want to make sure that we're being as clear as we can tonight. So if you could just describe in great detail the purpose of the code. My understanding is that the on-site parking that the applicant has is a requirement and that it be screened. And therefore, any FAR on the site would pretty much, therefore, by definition, presume to include parking within its FAR, unless it was so buried underneath, in a basement that it didn't count as FAR. Am I on the right track?
Yeah, so our floor FAR is the floor area ratio. To get that ratio, you use the gross floor area, which does include enclosed spaces and carports and parking, above ground parking. It excludes basements, so that's never included. So yeah, not a surface lot is what Rebecca is telling me. So if there was no building above that parking, then obviously there would be that space of parking would not have to be included in the floor area ratio. So with those two standards that you mentioned, that the parking needs to be provided for the use and that the parking needs to be screened if it's a surface area, if it's not below grade parking, then that further adds it into the FAR, which the calculations show in the applicant's materials, but it puts that building over top of the FAR requirement. If there was no building there, or if there was just surface lot, or if there was no parking there, then if there was no parking there and it was just building, that would still be over FAR. But if it was just a surface lot, the building would meet that requirement. So I do think the combination of those couple standards makes application of the standards a little complicated on this particular property. And I think that's why the downtown plan provides some of that guidance for downtown development to eliminate the parking requirement in downtown districts from the FAR requirement, because it does put some additional constraints on development. So there is that, but that parking being at surface level and being screened does add to the mass of a building. So it's both sides.
Well, and those last two statements are the ones that I've honestly wrestled with. So if you could please elaborate on that a little bit. The parking being removed from counting towards FAR still very much counts towards the actual volume of space that the building is taking up, which is that's exactly what FAR is meant to do. So to say that it would hopefully be exempt would mean that FAR is almost moot too, depending on how much parking you want to provide. Is that what you're saying the code is really trying to get us towards?
I think our downtown plan has suggested that we remove parking from FAR calculation in downtown lots, as it makes development more complicated. So I think that's a purpose that was outlined in the downtown plan, is to sort of make development in downtown more viable in a lot of different ways. That's one of the ways that was suggested by that plan. Because downtown development is tricky, there is also transit and parking and walkability and reduced parking standards because of all that other access. So perhaps that the parking didn't need to be included in the FAR. That's still a community decision. We haven't put that into the code yet. But with that guidance, we were able to support this project and this variance, also knowing that the project is providing its parking, which is positive. So they're not having a negative impact on parking in downtown, and they are screening the parking, which is another requirement, rather than leaving an open air space, which we probably would have had to interpret that. But if we imagine that there were no walls around that parking area, it would not look visually attractive. It might not be included in FAR, but that still is sort of a carport, so it might still have to be included. But if a developer was trying to get around that requirement and left the parking open, seems like that's a less desirable outcome. And if they provided no parking, also potentially a less desirable outcome. So always when we're developing, weighing all those different factors, it can be challenging to meet all the standards on one site, particularly in downtown, particularly when there are constraints like floodplain, existing buildings, existing sidewalks that are really new, those types of things.
Great. Thank you for that elaborate answer. That's exactly what I was looking for. Appreciate it. Any other questions?
Follow up on that. So since we have a new area plan with, I would say, no adjustments to our CDC based on that, will we be using how do I want to say this? Will we say that the area plan goals are staff's goals and city's goals until which time we define them better in a decision through city council, i.e. height limits, until we say, like has happened before, city council says we want this, not this, then that guidance becomes less effective if they've already said we don't want 45 feet everywhere. Like how long is the area plan, like all of a sudden it seems like it's becoming more of a guiding document. Everything you're saying is you're agreeing with everything in the area plan, even though none of that's codified. How long will that go on for? How's that for a more concise question?
I'm still having trouble kind of understanding the question, but,
You're recommending exceeding the height limits because the new area plan says we should be looking at higher densities, et cetera.
we're not. So again, so we're recommending approval of the height variance because it meets an acceptable alternative. And the acceptable alternative that we found is that it is providing flood prevention, meeting flood prevention standards for this building, which it doesn't have to do. They didn't have to build 1 foot above the floodplain. They could have built lower and met, avoided flooding in different ways in their building if they had to. So what we did when we looked at this project was, when looking at the variances, again, one of the criteria for approval asks us, does this variance, is it consistent with the future guiding direction of your plans? We find that this building is, based on the future land use district, which includes various character elements. So it is one part of our evaluation, but not the foundation for our recommendation. So I think, like I mentioned, we'll be in a gray space that'll be tricky for us to navigate for a little while we have a code that has some clear standards that are not entirely consistent with our future direction. We may go through a community process, and decide that our standards are exactly what we want them to be. And we disagree with what our plan says. We haven't asked that specific question yet, so I don't know the answer. We might change nothing, we might change everything, but until we do, we're trying to understand that guidance as best we can and try to use it, but I'll also obviously base our recommendation on the standards in the code and whether it meets the criteria for approval.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No?
I have one quick question. I wasn't here the first time. And so I just want to make sure that I'm understanding this correctly, that kind of the recent history of the parcel, there hasn't been any changes to the CDC, any changes to the floodplain since the applicant took ownership of the property and this process started.
Yeah, so the CDC hasn't had any changes from prior to the owner owning it or the current owner. The parcel itself has undergone some changes, so they've consolidated some lots and prepared that property for development. It was multiple lots. It did have some existing buildings on it, so that has been changing through the course of this project. But no, our standards haven't changed since this project started.
And as far as you know, the FEMA flood map hasn't changed.
Correct.
Okay.
I do think that the community plan was not adopted prior to owning the lot. That was happening while we were purchasing the lot and was a big discussion, just understanding what the community direction was. So that was adopted after. So that's a pretty recent adoption, the community plan.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Nope. Two of you look like you're about to ask a question, so I don't want to step on you. No, it's okay. Okay, great. Well, then let's go to public comment for this agenda item. Is there anybody here who would like to give public comment on this? Great. We ask that you give us your name and address and keep your comments to 3 minutes.
Good evening, Scott Marr, 33250 Emerald Meadows Drive, and I am a longtime business person in this community. And I just want to support this project. I think the changes these guys have made make it an even better project. I thought it was a great project to start with. And Colin's a nice guy, but I'm not going to talk about that tonight. Just a few things I think are important. We have somebody's making I got to guess, as being a developer, about a $30 million investment downtown. It creates a vibrant downtown restaurant. It provides 8 high-end lodging units, which I think are in congruence with the community or the downtown plan. And just running some numbers on it as a former hotelier, I came up with about $600,000 in city sales taxes that'll be generated. There's contributions to the transient rental taxes of about $200,000, and significant property taxes for our schools and county infrastructure. Also, they're creating some public parking. And from the downtown steamboat plan, the things I took a quick look at that today. This project definitely creates street level vitality and vibrancy. It supports locals and tourists in the land use that it provides, and it increases lodging opportunities by putting tourists in our businesses downtown. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Is there any other public comment?
Luke Tellier, do you need my address? Okay.
Roughly?
33A. I like this building. I think it's going to do a lot for Yampa Street. When I was growing up, Yampa Street it had a flower shop and a shooting range, and Irene Workman's house, who made wedding cakes. I like the way that Yampa Street is sizing up. It's going to be a nice addition to it. Before this, it was Co-op's old tire yard, which was nothing to look at anyway. And then they cut down the sawmill over on 20 Mile and made it an orange peel bicycle shop. And then Rohrbaugh built the Double Z. And I talked to him, and he was pretty excited about seeing something like this happen. Unless I'm mistaken, this has already been approved by the city planners. They're kind of recommending it. So I would like to see this building go up because it would be good for my hometown of Steamboat. It would be not out of character and not out of line, and envision with the way that the town is going. We're growing in the right way. They're trying to do it the right way. They're coming to you and asking your permission and saying, what can we do? You asked them to lower the roof. They lowered the roof. I think they've pretty much given you everything that you've asked for. And I can't see any viable reason why you wouldn't want to have something like this be on the west end of town next to the river, because it's going to be quite an addition. And trust the people that you send out to do the job. If they say, people you send out to do the job say, hey, we like this. If they do this, this, and this, we should let them have it, and they do it. I think you should let them have it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Hi, thank you. My name is Michelle Carrigal. I live on Laurel Street. I'm here representing a majority of the owners of Waterside Village, the building that is directly next door. And you guys have seen, I've written some letters to all of you pointing out some discrepancies that we have with the code and our vision plan, and just want to say that this is a vision plan. It is not a codified plan. And until it is a codified plan, I believe that we need to stick with the code, because the code is what tells our community what we can count on. Okay, we can't just be like, oh, I think we should do this because I think it's really cool. And then it disrupts the neighbors, it disrupts what's happening. And the CY2, I'm particularly concerned about the fact that the building is using averaging for their setback, as I mentioned in the letter, because our code does not specify that we can use averaging for setbacks, and so I don't see how that could possibly be considered an appropriate way to meet the setbacks that are required. I would like to mention there's a lot of talk about how the building is working with the same as Waterside, so on and so forth, but actually that is not the case due to the fact that they are requesting a 0 setback and then not having complete setbacks on next to Waterside Village. It has created basically a massive wall that all of the owners there would be looking at. And again, that's where the application of the code comes in. Of course, everybody at Waterside knew that eventually there would be a building there, right? But what we counted on is that the code would be followed and that there would be the appropriate setbacks. And there are not, and we feel it's very detrimental to the use of our building and our enjoyment of the space. And again, this building could be designed with those setbacks in mind, with the 10-foot setbacks, complete across the building, but they've chosen to use an average setback, which again, I don't think our code allows. Not even sure that it can be allowed by state law in performance of our variance. I would have to confirm that, but I don't know for sure. So I just think that we need to be really careful about using a vision document as a guideline for how we choose to build our buildings. And until that is codified, we need to stick with variances that make sense, not variances that allow the builder to develop the largest possible footprint and get the most square footage as they possibly can. I realize this is a difficult decision. I appreciate your time and consideration. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Do we have any other?
Hi, everyone. My name's Sash. I rent 771 Pawinta Street. Just a couple things I wanted to mention about this project. My family, we grew up coming here since I was a little child. I mean, I learned to ski here. Some of my fondest memories were renting bikes mountainside, taking the core trail down, stopping at Double Z, getting sandwiches and going enjoying them at the park. Right now, that is non-existent. There's no life on that end of town. The demo has already begun, and if this wonderful family doesn't get this project approved, they will then be forced to sell, most likely to an out-of-state hedge fund investor, who will then have this, who knows what project will be developed there, but definitely not our community's interest at heart. So I support this project. I want life back on that side of town. I want to get a sandwich at his lovely restaurant that he's going to develop, go sit in the park and enjoy it and have a reason to bike to that end of town versus it just be something that's non-existent. So hope you guys take that into consideration, and thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Is there any other public comment?
Hello, Commissioner. My name is Brian Ray, 37305 Saddleback Drive, excuse me. I'm a former Summit County Planning Commissioner and Silverthorne Planning Commissioner. And taking a look at this project, I like it a lot. And it incorporates a lot of nice things. And that lot was just prime for redevelopment for what the applicant is trying to do. And I would encourage you guys to have this move forward. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Is there anybody else here in person? While you're coming down, if you want to make public comment online as well, if you could raise your hand on Zoom and we'll know that you want to be called on. I see one person already has, and we'll get to you shortly.
Hi, I'm Michelle Gansey, and I live at 1580 Mark Twain Court. We're relatively new to town. My husband and I moved here full-time about 2 years ago. And the first time I came here, I was 3. I'm 59, so been coming here a long time and seeing a lot of the progress. And so now that we're here full time, it's really evident to us that a project like this is really growing with the community and how it appears to have changed over the years. I think it definitely increases vitality and some of those things that we've talked about regarding the global plan. I guess the other thing is I've come to the last few meetings and the other meetings that I'm a bit confused in the issue that the folks at Waterside have, just because it's literally the same size. And I understand that those, owners are opposed to that project. Literally, since I've lived on Mark Twain, there's been 2 big houses that have been built that have blocked a lot of my view. But, I think it is valid that we're growing as a community, and the things that Collins' beautiful building will provide for our community are valid. And I think also I agree a lot with the first 2 speakers in terms of the revenue that's mentioned, because I think that is valid as well. So I guess, all being said, I'm in support of Collins' project, and I did see the first renditions, and I think this one is a tremendous change. And then one last comment about Waterside. With those setbacks that were mentioned, I'm not sure that those will actually change the view for those people much at all. And you can correct me if I'm wrong there, but I'm not sure there's going to be a lot that is changed. And I saw that in the 2 buildings, in my own neighborhood. Big changes in roof elevation didn't change much, but I'm excited about the opportunity for this building and what it'll do for our community, including the parking. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Is there any other public comment here in person that would? Okay, we'll go online. First, I think it says Vince Arroyo. If you'd like to unmute yourself and you can give us your comments as well.
Hello, yes. Can you hear me all right?
We can.
Thank you guys for what you do. I want to piggyback off the last 3 commentators about the project. I am for this project. I grew up in this town. My family grew up in this town, and we've all had changes. Now, for people to come here and say, well, they shouldn't build this or that, you know what? They should have thought about that when they bought their places. So I want to say, please go forth with this project. I support it 100%. Thank you guys for what you do.
All right, thank you for your comments. And second online, I see Kelly Pickett. If you'd like to unmute yourself and
yeah, hi, this is actually Ralph Pickett, and I am
That's great.
address 1110 Yampa Street, Unit D, so Waterside Village. And I would say I'm always a very big proponent of development, new development. I think this is a beautiful project, and there's no argument with that. However, would have to agree with Michelle that Carrigal, who commented earlier, that there are variances here that impact the units, and they are in particular like that big wall that's right next to Waterside. It would completely eliminate any views to the north from the balconies looking that direction. So, like Michelle said, as owners, we knew what we were getting into. We knew that would be developed, but we would have expected, we do expect that it would be developed per code. So, and I don't think that's saying we don't want this developed and we don't want the development group that's there to do it. We just would like it to be done per code. So, thank you.
all right, thank you for your comments. Is there anybody else online who would like to raise their hand? The reactions button? All right, seeing none, is there anybody else here that I missed? Okay, we'll close public comment. Oh, you already went, I believe. No, that's okay. No, I'm sorry. Thank you, though. So with that, we'll close public comment. First, we come back to the applicant. If you have any follow-up.
see here. Let me get to the right. Oh, I was just trying to get to the right slide, but sorry. Just the setback page. Thanks. Just to address the setback comments relative to Waterside, this dimensional diagram, little doodad at the bottom right, is the typical step back over 28 feet. So per the CDC, that step back is intended to be, at the third level. Waterside chose to do that at the first level and asked for variance for a 0 setback as well. And additionally, there's supposed to be a 25-foot setback at the third level that they don't have, which shows there's different ways to skin a cat and there's different benefits to changing geometry slightly. They get a great second level patio, but then there is a sheer wall or whatever, 2-story wall that doesn't step back at the third floor. So I think this just illustrates to me that, the code and the variance process is meant to be variable because there's different ways to decrease a mass of a building than just wedding cake stepping it back at the third floor. The code specifically doesn't want that to happen and mentions it multiple times. Like, we don't want wedding cake buildings, so we want varied setbacks. We do mention the average setback on the third floor because there's spots where we're stepped back 25 feet per the code, but we want this varied element, and we feel like the intent of the step back is to decrease the mass of the building in its entirety. So we're proposing a different way to do that, ins and outs. And let me tell you, this isn't the cheapest way to do it. A cheap way is to stack all the walls and step it back. I'm not trying to it's just, we're trying to create a different element and a different way to punctuate that mass than just a strict application of the standard, which is why, we go through the variance criteria, as I mentioned before. I think there's some misinterpretation of how we're using these guiding documents. The code tells us we have to. If we're asking for a variance, that is one criteria. We have to be in line with the guiding documents. That's one element that we looked at. And I think that the detailed narrative that the planning staff has put together tells you how we meet each criteria in addition to that one per the codified CDC. So what we're asking of you is fully justified under the CDC. Just to be blunt, it's not just the code, the community plan that we're trying to, hang our hat on. It's all these other things we've done to meet that intent. And so I just urge you guys to think relative to that process, that we're not just trying to hang our hat on these future plans. And, we aren't asking for 45 feet. We're asking for 40 that matches up with the building next to us. And we're not asking for a sheer wall. We're asking for part of the building to be at 0. And so I think the big H word, height, and the big setback word has to be taken in context relative to what we're asking of you. And I know this gets a lot of press because it's an emotional site, but we feel like that too. And so I just want to be clear about those intents we've met relative to the process of asking for a variance. And we don't take that lightly. So I just wanted to clarify that relative to that setback issue and a couple of other things that were mentioned, but.
Okay. All right, great, thanks. Toby, did you have any final follow-up as well?
Did have a little bit of follow-up, again, regarding Ms. Carrigal's comments. So the setbacks that we've been talking about are for the front property line. So the CY2 zone district requires a 10-foot setback on the front property line up to 28 feet and a 25-foot setback for the principal building on the front property line above 28 feet. So the front property lines are 12th and Yampa. So that's where we would expect a 10-foot setback on the ground stories and then a 25-foot setback on the upper stories. So the side adjacent to Waterside is actually a side setback, which the CY2 zone district for the principal building is a 0-foot minimum setback. So while the building could be set back further, it would be optional. So the code allows a 0-foot setback at that side of the building. So that's why there's not a setback variance request for the side of that building against waterside. In addition, Ms. Carroll mentioned the average discussion of the setbacks. So the building does articulate in and out from 10 to 25 feet, and that an average is mentioned in the applicant's narrative. And so the applicant can mention what they want in their narrative. Our staff recommendation for approval is based on the exact numbers. So for the setback variances, there's portions of the building and the upper stories that are 10-foot setback. So if we need to clarify that, the setback variance request for the upper stories is for a 10-foot setback instead of a 25-foot. Similarly, for any other height variances, the only other thing that we average, and yeah, we actually have an average for, is plate height, but we're not talking about that tonight. So our recommendation is based on the code standards and very specific numbers, not based on averages.
Thank you, Toby. Any final follow-up questions from commissioners?
I have one. So I'm still a little confused with the waterside setback conversation. You said earlier that they also have a 0 setback at the front lot line, or did I misunderstand that? They also have one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, great. Any other questions? Nope, I didn't either. Then we'll close our public portion and come to commissioners for discussion and a motion.
Overall, I'm really, really glad that there's a quality development taking place on that corner. I mean, from my standpoint, that has been an area that has been ignored to a large degree. Double Z closed probably, 3 years ago, 4 years ago now. And I think this is a great addition. I think the applicant and the architect have done a good job in reducing the number of variances requested, as well as highlighting use of guidance documents, which honestly I'm very comfortable with in terms of helping us guide development in the community, especially downtown. So I'm supportive of the project.
Any additional discussion? Do you want to wait till your thing's done updating before you?
I don't know why he started to update now. No, I'll wait as long as I can.
I'm wondering, should we discuss like variance by variance?
If you'd like to, I can be flexible to either, or you can just give us your thoughts.
Okay. Yeah, it's tough. I mean, this is a really tough one. I think some of the variances, I think like the east glazing, no problems there. I know no one wants to stare into a brick wall, and you need fire separation. No problem there. I'm having a hard time with some of the arguments on like the height because of the floodplain. They're asking for the height variance because of the design of the building. So the floodplain has been there, and yeah, in my mind, I'm having a hard time with that because it's the way the building is designed that they're asking for the height variance. And then the biggest one to me is the FAR. I think the crucial question that I heard from City Council was, is the building just too big? Is the mass and scale just too much? And I'm also having a hard time taking out parking, because parking, like you said, contributes to the mass and scale. And so I think from what I'm hearing from the community and what I heard from City Council is the building just too big? And my mind goes towards yes. And the setbacks are really hard for me because it seems like it's just kind of anything goes on Yampa Street. It seems like the setbacks are all over the place, and there have been tons of variances issued in the past. And so it's really hard for me to say no to this variance when the building literally next door got the exact same variance, plus lots of other buildings on Yampa Street. And so those are some of my thoughts.
I'll contribute only to your last point real quick, which is that I was a little surprised how much that seemed to enter into conversation on this project compared to others was, well, what else has happened on this street, whether it was overall height or whether it was front setback or various things. Time and time again, staff has, I think, correctly reminded us that every project is looked at on its own merits and how its own design either is mitigated or finds an acceptable path through a variance process or not. The fact that another one exists is not an indication of whether or not we should apply a variance on a new project. So I have been very careful to straight ignore that part of the conversation on what else is going on. There are other parts of Yampa Street that I think, knowing what they've done and looking at how that experience is, whether it's at 5th and Yampa, right? Or whether it's at 7th and Yampa, what do those sidewalks, how do they feel, and what variances did they get might help inform more knowledge for you or me on whether or not this is going to be successful on specifically what they're asking for, but whether another one got one has meant nothing to me. So I'll add that, at least from my perspective, which is why I was very careful to kind of ask, both staff and the applicant how they think this corner in particular is going to work at a 0-foot setback. I do think that different parts of Yampa Street are successful, and I think some parts are very unsuccessful and don't feel comfortable to walk. And that in large part is due to how narrow and imposing the building is on the narrow sidewalk. We need to be careful on its own merits for that sake. That's all I wanted to add to that point of yours.
I'll add on that. I think in this area, I think we're talking, 16-foot, 18-foot sidewalks. These are big sidewalks. So I'm not concerned about, overpowering the 0 setback. Not where this is. That's just my view.
Any additional discussion?
Yeah, the first time I looked at this project, I felt very much like you did, just kind of a little overwhelmed by the number of variances and felt like I needed to go through them one by one because there were so many, and just to wrap my brain around each one individually. And so I did that the first time, and what I came up with was that the only one that bothered me is one that they got rid of. Not that bothered me, the one that I didn't feel like actually met the criteria for approval. And so they've gotten rid of that one. And I think that they've done a phenomenal job of listening to what we've said, some of what council said, some of what the community has said, and increased the transparency along that corner, pulled that corner back. I think that I really respect that they've actually tried to tackle most of the comments they've heard. And so I'm in support of the project. And I think it's interesting, the floor area ratio conversation. I think it's really interesting that the maximum is 200, right, on this lot, and they're at pretty much 200, and they've built, or they're proposing to build pretty much all the way to the lot lines on every side. And so we spend a lot of time talking about these floor area ratios, and sometimes we even kind of are frustrated with projects because we don't get anywhere near the densities that are allowed on the lot. And this is just a really good example of the fact that it's really hard to get to these densities. Really, really difficult, unless you're doing something unless you're getting variances. And so the variance they're asking for to include the parking inside the mass of the building is perfectly acceptable to me. I would much rather see that than a building that's set forward and having a surface lot behind it with nothing above it. I think that this was a great way to apply that. And I think that it meets the criteria for approval for those variances, all of them at this point. Yeah.
That was one of the things I was curious about, is how the commissioners sat through the first time, what they would be thinking about the revisions. Even though, as you stated in the beginning, Brian, is that this needs to be evaluated on its own. Not, oh, they made improvements, so maybe now we have to improve it. Does the current project meet the code and meet your definitions of the code? I had a few things that bothered me. I mean, on the height variance, there's constant comparison to Waterside. Waterside has scalloped roof. This has a solid roof, so it's visually, I find it a lot more imposing than at least Waterside made some effort to mitigate the effect of their building height. Glazing, the glazing issue. We pick and choose some of the things for the new area plan that we're using to help guide our decision-making. One of the things in the new area plan says parking shouldn't be on facing any of the front of the buildings. So because this project has pushed the underground parking to the 12th Street, that means they had to use a unique form of glazing to hide it or not hide it. And so that's why there's a glazing variance, because the parking is actually in the wrong place if you look at the community area plan and where it says parking is supposed to be within the building. It's not supposed to be on the front lot line, or the front of the building. It should be tucked behind the building. Now, a building with two frontage lines makes that pretty hard to determine where the back is, but because they pushed it up to 12th Street, they have to use a unique form of glazing. The zero setback, I have no problem with the Yampa Street setback. The bigger sidewalk, it matches the Waterside building facade. But on the 12th Street side, if it was pushed back, we're talking about maybe some benches and, again, activization. Having a ADA ramp or other things are going on that side is not activating that side of the building. You know, giving people a reason to be there is activating that sidewalk. We have to remember, we're going to get probably at some time, maybe even while I'm still here, 12th and Lincoln getting redeveloped, that building. Even though it was remodeled recently, it's still an old building. But anyway, these changes are going to be influencing every next building, just like we're saying, oh, Waterside got these variances, so we're going to take these variances. The next building is going to take it maybe a little further as well. And that, at some point, we have, in my mind, I have to say, when does that stop? That just because the next building is bigger, I can do at least that much. I have a little issue with that. So I have trouble with that zero setback on 12th Street. The 25-foot, I'm calling it activization, it's not activization, the 25-foot building length. I kind of mentioned this when we merged the properties, that by merging the multiple properties, we're more likely going to get one bigger product. I think one of the reasons for the 25-foot limit in length is to have multiple properties, to give more people a reason to be walking down there. If only the restaurant is at that end of the building, only those people going to the restaurant are walking down there. If there was if that was broken up and had multiple entrances on 12th, excuse me, on Yampa more specifically, that would be, I believe, one of the reasons why we have a 25-foot limit on building space, it's not building width, I forget what.
Massing.
It wasn't just massing, it was.
Broken up in 25-foot.
Yeah, it has to be broken in 25-foot increments. And part of that, I think, is to have different uses in every one of those 25 feet. And we talked about it a little bit when we joined the properties. And that one bothered me a little bit. And now we just have one big property on the corner. Well, before I forget, when I asked about the use of the plan as a guideline, just about every one of our variances, staff says it meets both the CDC and the new plan. That's why I question that, because every one of those, the last sentence says staff thinks that it meets the new plan. That's why I wanted to know, well, how long is the new plan a guiding document versus maybe future decisions that might be made about height, density, et cetera. Not that that makes any change of my opinion. I had one more here. Character. we keep talking about character, like do the buildings like match the architectural style of other buildings? When I was reading through the plan and when I remember a lot of the plan is talking about is a different kind of character. And I'm going to read one of the sentences from it. It says, this document outlines the desired land use and community character that future development regulations will be guided by. So not just what the building looks like, but what purpose does it serve and what part of our community does it serve? You guys have both brought up the taller ceilings and of the building and how it affected the overall height. And the applicant came back and said, well, that's what the people that we're selling it to demand. Well, what does that mean for us? Is that a criteria for me to say that's okay? So there's other characteristics, whether this building matches the looks of other buildings. And so community character is one of the characteristics that we're supposed to be looking for. I'm not sure how I would bring that into the criteria of approval and where I feel that it may not meet community character, but it's something to think about that doesn't come up when we're talking about it, when all I hear is, building size and mass and how it matches other ones. I believe those are my biggest concerns.
Can I push back on just a couple of those points? You were talking about community character. We just redefined what our community character is and how we're supposed to be looking at that with the master plan, with the canvas. And so if we're talking about the kind of character that our community wants to adopt, like that's it. That is it. And yes, there's only like really one place that we can even talk about that in these variances. It's one of the criteria for approval for a variance. But I think that there's no better place to look for what our community character moving forward is supposed to be besides the master plan, because everybody's going to have a different idea of it. And that was like the one coming together that we've done recently. A lot of the public comment has been make sure this meets code. And so I think that it's really important that we actually stick to, if we're trying to do that, I think it's really important we stick to actual code and don't read into things like 25-foot increments. There is nothing in the code that says that's supposed to be broken up into different uses or different buildings or different spaces. It just says that the building itself, something architecturally needs to be broken up into 25-foot increments, which
True.
Can absolutely be one large building. So I don't know that that's, what's that? No, they didn't do it. They're not asking for a variance of that, but I don't think that we can make up code interpretations and then say that they're also asking for variances from that. Like your interpretation of why that might be, I think shouldn't really be part of the conversation. If that's all I'm saying. And then you talked about the west glazing and they got rid of that variance. So they had the like slatting on the outside of the parking garage they were kind of trying to call that glazing on the first time, but they've increased the glazing on that side. As far as I understand, there's no glazing variance on that side any longer. So they actually have the glazing that they're required to have.
It's the east side that has the.
Yeah, the east side that's a blank wall doesn't have it. That's the only glazing variance now.
But the west one is utilizing that slatted portion.
I don't think so.
No? Okay.
There's enough transparent glazing to meet the standard. There is also slatting, but it's not included.
It's not contributing to it.
No.
Thank you.
So, and there is no variance for the west side.
Yep. Sorry, keep going.
No, that's all.
Glad to.
So what's your justification for not doing 25-foot increments? What's your if you don't like mine, what's yours? That says by them not doing it, it's okay.
I think I agree with staff that it's just to break up the massing of the building. It's to break up. So it's not one big flat wall. We have lots of methods to create a building that doesn't have one big flat empty space. That's what most of the massing standards are kind of getting at. And so they are providing lots and lots of different variations in the facade of the building with materials, with glazing, with step backs. So I think that they're providing an alternative that's at least equal to that standard itself.
I'll say that a slightly different way, which is that the 25-foot, while it requires a variance, the intent, like to actually do 25, 25, 25, 25. Oh, I ran out of space. Well, this one's only 7. You know, like it's not going to end up with a better product. It's not going to end up with a more creative product or a more enlivening, is that a word? Enlivening product. But the intent should still remain. And I think what the applicant communicated really well in their reasoning, and I think staff did as well on that variance item, is that while some of them are more, they are differentiated from each other and therefore are adding more creativity and more movement of the building massing than if they were just purely adherent to the 25 foot. So it is actually equal or better or acceptable alternative as they're calling it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it is the variation. That's the way I look at it. And I think there's a lot of variation in this building. I'll also say, I think one of the reasons parking is in the back is because that's where the alley is.
Yeah.
And that's where the entrance to the parking is. When I'd rather see it there than honestly on Yampa.
All right, I'll go real quick. It's actually not going to be quick because there's a lot of things. I want to try and get all the things there so city council can feel like they heard us properly. So kind of going through the variances, our variance number 1 at overall height, I do think that they are behaving together as we talked about in our first conversation or review of this application. There is a combination between setbacks, overall height, and FAR. If you only had setbacks and overall height, then you would just be allowing a cube that was that size. FAR forces something less than that pure cube, and that is actually a good thing. We want something that forces more interest than just purely up to that height. That gives me more pause with the FAR variance, which I'll come back to. But from the overall height variance and looking at how they have mitigated it, brought it down, and where it is, where the variance is located, is mitigated to practically all of the public's experience. So I think that in this case, it is still meeting the intent of the overall height, and it's meeting the criteria by not creating some kind of adverse impact or I would say obviously creating an imposing shape where that variance is happening. It's not in this case. So I can support that. The variance number 2, the front lot line, I'll just agree with you, Lou. I do think that in this specific case, while I already had my rant about how not all cases are equal, in this specific case, I do think that there is enough, all of the pieces are in place for it to be successful here as a 0-foot setback. It will not be creating a hardship, or not a hardship, an imposition or a cold and uninviting place by doing that, and it'll still work really well for the public. And meets the criteria there as well. Variance number 3, I actually think that the applicant did a really great job of pointing out the relationship of when we talk about a 25-foot, we're talking about 25-foot as it relates to a 10-foot setback. And as we're pushing the building forward, if we're okay with pushing the lower level forward, then how far back the upper level doesn't need to be all the way to 25-foot. We're only really asking for a 15-foot undulation of sorts anyway. And while they haven't done that everywhere, they have shown that that has added more interest and creativity and exists in enough places that it is pushing the building back. The glazing is obvious, as everybody has already said. The FAR is where I had the biggest pause on kind of how does going over it and creating a volume that is larger than the 200% that, as I was kind of asking during our questioning portion, needs to be considering parking when we talk about the volume of a building downtown. How does that work? And they are over and above, and have they considered that properly, or are they too close to that cube shape that I was talking about? Toby's answer to my question about how they are meeting criteria number 2 by looking to the guidance in the community plans that is suggesting that that is how we should be interpreting or exempting parking now, I think is everything I needed to hear in order to understand that this is meeting the intent of FAR and how it relates to parking. So I think that that becomes justifiable at that point. Variance number 6, I already kind of gave you my spiel on that as kind of trying to add to your conversation, Rich, but I do think that they're meeting the intent, even though it's not purely at 25 feet. It is not, in nowhere is it pushing too far in one increment that it has become a bare blank facade that is missed the point. And so I think that is meeting the acceptable alternative and actually a better alternative with more creativity. So yeah, so I think it meets all 6 variances. While I'm ranting, can I keep ranting for another minute? You guys okay? I haven't run out of the ability to talk yet. I will add how, first of all, how impressed I am that how quickly we're seeing all these changes that were made is wonderful, and I'm glad to see that effort. And I think it was a very successful effort. So really, both to the applicant and to staff for not only redesigning and submitting, but also reviewing, so that we could be here tonight as quickly as we are on the project is very impressive. So well done. The other thing that I think was a big contributing factor to its success tonight is the redesign of the corner, the added glazing that is helping on the west variance, but really just the softening of that corner in general and how that will appear to users of the Core Trail, people on the street, people walking by, people at the park. I think it is going to be a vast improvement, and I'm impressed with that change as well. And then the last thing I wanted to do was rant on the idea about character, because we have talked about character so much. My thing that I wrote down about it is that what I think that our code is doing is not requiring homogeny in character, but providing all of the boundaries to what your own creative interpretation of that character can be. They can't just do anything. There are limits to setbacks. There are limits to glazing. There's limits to materials. There's limits to height. There's a lot of limits, but there's not just a forced, it is only this. And I think that there is then a meeting of individual interpretation and creativity and community character, and that the applicant should be able to have at least some leeway to interpret that and make that unique to themselves instead of all the same. I think that in this case, the applicant has gone with a more contemporary interpretation of that box, but I think that they're within it. And I think that we should be very aware that that's what we've allowed within the code, and that's what they're fitting within, and that's why it is acceptable. It's not just personal, my own personal dream of all character of downtown. It's how are they fitting the box that we've given them. That was long. Thank you. That's all I had. Anybody else have any additional discussion or want to make a motion?
I think it's very impressive, the level of response to the comments and the questions that were raised the last time around, and how they've addressed them and how they've presented them. So honestly, I think this is going to be great for that corner of Yampa. So I'm going to motion to approve PL 2025-0339 with, God, there were a lot of conditions.
14
conditions.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
A second.
Okay, and a second. Any other final discussion? I will only add that I was taken aback by the added condition 14. I had appreciated earlier the information that we got. Thank you on that, that it doesn't matter. You guys both agree and that timeline doesn't create a problem, at least on my end. Not that it would, but I was confused at first. Yeah. Not hearing anything else, I will call for a vote.
Aye.
No.
Aye?
Aye.
No.
Right, then that motion passes 3-2. Thanks for your time again. All right, so we'll jump into our agenda item number 2 for this evening. This is, let me name it properly, PL 2025-0388, 1021 Merritt Street. Is the applicant here for a presentation?
If he can hear, if he is, he's online. I don't know that he will be.
Okay, I'm not sure who that even would.
Tom Kelly.
There's D&D Surveying and there's a Lois
Yes,
Kelly.
that would
Oh, D&D, yeah, you have your hand up. If you'd like to unmute yourself. Yeah, that's
Yep.
great.
Hi, can you hear me now, Brian?
We can.
Yep, thank you. Sorry, I had to unmute.
Yeah, go ahead and give us your presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, thanks. So basically,
Yep. Excuse me, Mr. Chair, you ask the applicant to please turn on his video for the quasi judicial hearing?
Yeah, did you hear us? You need to have your video on during our quasi judicial application.
let me see if this works. There we go.
Hi, welcome.
Yep, thanks. So what we're doing here is a lot line adjustment. So this is in concert with another planning application for a lot line adjustment subdivision minor modification that it's going through. So this is sort of a condition of approval for that as well. So they're both linked. And Jeremy, I don't know if Jeremy Brown is in the audience, but he's the lead planner that's been driving this through.
Oh, Jeremy is here.
So what we're doing here is, in order to get the lot line approved, there's two different zones on these two lots that are adjoining each other. And what we're trying to do is a 20-foot wide strip to enlarge the rear backyard of 1021 Merritt. So we're taking 20 feet from the southerly adjoiner 1024, the Boulevard. And we're going to have to rezone 1021 Merritt to be, I think it's RN2. If I'm not looking at the paperwork at the moment, but I think it's from RN1 to RN2. So I think generally staff's been supportive of this, and I did not see any inconsistencies with the subdivision and the blocks and some other of the properties in that area, North Highlands addition, that are not compatible with the neighborhood.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. We'll let you know if we have questions.
All right, thanks.
Jeremy, do you have a staff presentation as well?
Sure. Tom did a fairly good job of explaining what's happening here. If you all recall, we did a similar process for a lot out by the golf course, probably within the past year. We're actually taking because there's two lots that abut each other, the back to back, the line between them is shifting. They are in separate zone districts. The one to the north is in RN2, the one to the south is in RN1. So as that moves down, and we've reviewed that replat and we've approved it conditional on the approval of the rezoning, because we don't want to create a split zone lot. As we do that, though, we end up with a piece of this lot. It becomes split zone. Again, the plat has not been approved yet. It will be dependent on the approval of this. We're rezoning now a portion of the lot so that it would appropriately fit with the new aggregate lot. Briefly, our criteria for approval, as you know, we look at the consistency with the proposed zone district. What you are rezoning is actually has no building on it. It's just a piece of land that will be attached there to the northern lot. But that northern lot, which is zoned RN2 already and will be adjoined to this piece that you're rezoning today, is RN2, fits with the zone district standards. It's single family. The future land use map that was just adopted through the recent comprehensive plan suggests compact residential. Both the existing RN1 and RN2 are appropriate for that area. This RN2 parcel is still bordered to the east and west by RN2 parcels as well. For that reason, it stays compatible with the development pattern, which is our second criteria. Third criteria, advantages outweighing the disadvantages. Obviously, we want to avoid split zoning in this circumstance. We did not find any adverse impacts that needed to be mitigated or otherwise minimized through this process. And our last criteria is we found it to be a necessary response based on the conditional approval of the plat that was reviewed administratively and approved based on meeting all criteria in the code. With that, staff recommend approval of this rezoning.
Thank you, Jeremy. Any questions from commissioners? Okay. I'm not surprised. I don't either. We don't have public, so we will skip the public comment portion, and I guess we'll just come straight to commissioners for discussion and a motion.
I think this is pretty straightforward. Motion to approve PL 2025-0388, and there are no conditions associated with this.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Yep, agreed. This needs to, everything Jeremy said, it needs to be consistent in one property. That property's already been approved. We're just reviewing the zoning. The zoning matches what it is adjacent. Nothing else to see. Nothing else.
Yeah, not much to discuss. Pretty straightforward, I think.
Great. All right, I'll call for a vote.
Aye.
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 And that passes unanimously. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
That will bring us to agenda item number 3 this evening. This is PL 2026-0083, Appeal of Abandonment of Legal Nonconforming STR Use, PL 2022-0343. Is the applicant here for a presentation?
I brought this printout too for everybody because this didn't make it into your files as far as I understand. And this is the,
Wait, hold on just a second. You can give it to us, but then give us your name and for the record and everything into the mic for the everything.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
okay, so just name?
Yeah.
Okay, Meredith Rumsey. And then just go ahead and tell.
Yeah, that's great. We just need it recorded and all that.
Yeah, of course. So basically, we are here because this property that had the STR non-conforming status, I'll just sort of go, I'll start here. So the non-conforming use realistically was never abandoned, nor was there an intention to abandon it. This was a temporary interruption caused by circumstances outside of the owner's control when the property became physically uninhabitable due to a catastrophic water damage caused by a third party. The owner continuously acted to restore the property and resume STR operations as quickly as reasonably possible. Her name is Elizabeth Bassett, is the owner, and she bought the property in 2017 and has rented it ever since, so between 8 and 9 years. The owner and her family uses the home as a second home in addition. She's always adhered to the STR rules and been a good neighbor. She's had no prior violations and has always upheld the legal nonconforming status once that was granted. So basically what had happened was The company that was doing her rentals at that point in time had hooked up a water line that was listed in their documentation as was not supposed to be hooked up ever. So they hooked it up an ice maker line, a line to the refrigerator, and then they didn't come back to check it for 2 weeks. A housekeeper came back 2 weeks later, and there's water pouring out of the home. So it was no good. That was on October 30th, 2024 is the day that happened, that they hooked it up. And then on November 15th is when they went in and saw the water was flowing from the home. At that point in time, they realized that the house was in really bad shape. So they went ahead and canceled all future bookings at that because it was pretty much unsalvageable. So, and then you should have the supporting documents, I believe, as far as I know from the pictures from Service Master, who was the first person. So the rental company at that point in time called in Service Master. They came in and sort of started that mitigation process. And sort of so the timeline here is that, yeah, okay, so Service Master initial mitigation, they itemized the damage contents, and then that was not done until January 1st, 2025, due to the nature of the damage and how much they had to do. So there was the initial mitigation and then the list of also the itemized damage of all of the contents of it. And then the unsalvageable contents were reported on January 22nd. So right there, that was from November 15th to January 22nd. There were insurance approval delays from there that caused it to where the woman who owns the home, Elizabeth Bassett, got a local lady to take care of the whole on the ground process, to organize all of the contractors and do all of the work that was going to need to be done to restore the home so it could be rented again as soon as possible. That started on February 12th, 2025. And that was Robin that was hired to do that. So the project scope entailed demolition of the entire kitchen, all the first floor flooring, drywall, sheetrock repair on the entry and the main level of the home, paint throughout, replacing all the destroyed kitchen appliances, the entire garage, drywall repair, insulation, plumbing repair, electrical repair, and then flooring replacement. So quite a massive scope there. So February 17th, 2026, 15 months after basically the November date, was when the final heat zone was functioning. Elizabeth came to me to start working with her property. I own a vacation rental company here in Steamboat. And she came to me because of her experience with the previous company. She did not want to continue working with them. So she came to me to start working with her, telling me that, we're still working on the property, getting up to snuff so it would be able to be rented. And at that point, we, started working on contracts between us. We started helping, with what we could in the process to help move it along. And then the thing with vacation rentals is challenging is that we were starting from scratch. So when she has another company, they've got tons of reviews and clicks, and they're really high up in the rankings. So they get bookings a lot quicker. For us to start, we did what we could to get bookings as quickly as possible. And so we offered a 20% discount for the first 6 people that booked in order to get people in the door, to get it going as quickly as possible. She did have, and this is what I gave you all there. She did have a booking on the books through the other company for December 26th through December 31st of 2024. We had our first booking for her on December 13th of 2025. So had those bookings not had to be canceled because of this massive, making the home uninhabitable, it would have been within the year that we would have had the rental. So we would have been in compliance with the policy. And then the date that I submitted my permit renewal was April 2nd. The permit will expire on May 15th. She spent over $150,000 so far on between Service Master and then all the other renovation items. And, we believe that that really shows that she was never meaning to move away from this STR process. She wanted to keep it as a short-term rental, but obviously, I'm sure every one of you has dealt with contractors in Steamboat and, know that no matter how many times they say they're going to be there, it does not necessarily happen. And so, trying to handle this from afar, she got the person on the ground because she realized that it was outside of her scope, and living in Vermont, trying to handle this from afar, trying to get it done as quickly as possible. So, we're just slightly outside of that window had she not have to have those, or we would have been, in compliance had she not had to have those cancellations, but that was sort of forced upon her. And I think that that's pretty much all.
Good.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. We'll let you know if we have questions.
Yeah.
Great. And Rebecca, do you have a staff report as well?
I do.
Presentation.
Just sit down or stand up here.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Okay, brief presentation. You've all seen this slide before. We know the STR overlay zone went into effect June 15th, 2022. This subject property is located in overlay zone B3. That's one of the restricted subzones, or what we call the yellow zone. And a property must have been lawfully used as a vacation rental prior to that June 15th, 2022 date in order to be eligible for an STR license. Legal nonconforming status, as Planning Commission is well aware, must not be abandoned in order to maintain that eligibility in that restricted subzone. And we use the STR license and the renewal process annually to review documentation to ensure that legal nonconforming use has not been abandoned or otherwise terminated. So this slide is the language that Planning Commission has seen many, many times with every prior appeal. And this is in the legal nonconforming use section of the code, section 103. Subsection D speaks to the provisions or the criteria or circumstances by which legal nonconforming use automatically terminates. The language that you're very familiar with is section 2, which states that the legal nonconforming status of a use shall be terminated immediately upon the abandonment. And then it talks about that abandonment period or being a period of discontinuance for 12 consecutive months, regardless of the intent to resume operation of the use. This particular case, as you just heard from the appellant's representative, deals with damage to the structure. So that brings into play one of the other criterion that the code speaks to in terms of termination of legal nonconforming use. Just to let you all know, there are 5 criteria that terminate legal nonconforming use status. So there are 2 that are applicable in this case. That second one is section 103D5, in which states that legal nonconforming status shall terminate immediately if the structure housing the use is destroyed or damaged to an extent in excess of 50% of current reconstruction cost, or such structure is damaged or destroyed and not restored within 12 months. So we're going to talk a little bit more in detail about that language in a couple of slides. So just a quick timeline of relevant dates here. You can see this property was registered in December of 2022 with that legal nonconforming use status. The first license was issued in 2023. The property owner renewed that license as required in 2024. And we do have documentation that the last stay that occurred in 2024 ended on October 27th. The license was then again renewed in 2025. And based on the information that we've received from the property owner and their representative, the property suffered damage on November 15th of 2025. And the repair was completed in December. Sorry, I have those dates wrong. Second meeting in a row where I have typos for you. The damage occurred November 15th, 2024, correct? Yes, sorry, I apologize. And the repair was completed in December of 2025. And then that first stay, as the appellant noted, began on December 13th of 2025. So I apologize again for the typo. So there are the two relevant sort of sections I have highlighted in red. That would be sort of that typical 12-month non-use abandonment period. So you can see that between October 27th of 24 and December 13th of 25 exceeds 12 months. And then that second criterion for termination of the legal nonconforming use, I have those dates highlighted in orange, and that would be November 15th, 24 to December of 2025, which again exceeds 12 months. So just to sort of recap, there are two reasons for our decision that the legal nonconforming status of this use have terminated. The first is that typical abandonment period. I don't think there's any dispute that the use did not actually occur within a 12 consecutive month time period. The second, and this is where I'll go into a little bit more detail with this language, because this is the first time that this has come into play in your hearing of an appeal. So the language around damage to the structure that houses a legal nonconforming use has two parts to it. And it's important to note this is an or statement. So both of these don't have to be met. Only one of them has to be met to terminate legal nonconforming status. So the first part speaks to if the damage or destruction to the structure exceeds 50% of the current reconstruction cost. In this case, what was provided to us was an estimated repair cost of about $130,000. I don't think there's any question that that is unlikely to exceed 50% of the current construction or current replacement costs, reconstruction costs of that unit. So I don't believe that termination of the use occurs based on that first part. The second part of that or statement is that the structure is damaged or destroyed and not restored within 12 months. Based on the information that we received, the repair took 13 months to complete after the damage occurred. So per section 103D5, the legal nonconforming use terminated as the structure was damaged and not restored within the required 12 months. There is language in that section that speaks to the planning director having authorization to grant an extension to that 12-month restoration or reconstruction time period. This is also a two-part or multi-part test, and this is an and statement, so both of these need to be true. So the code states that the planning director may grant an extension to the 12-month restoration time period if the structure is of a large scale and if the changes that are required or needed are required to comply with the building code. It goes on to say that in this kind of a circumstance, a building permit application has to be submitted within 12 months. And the only changes that can be made to the structure are those that are needed to comply with building code. So in this circumstance, I did review this extension language. This structure is approximately 1,500 square feet. I do not believe that is of a large scale. And I found no evidence of a building permit being issued or applied for within this relevant time period, with the exception of one that was issued for the installation of an electric vehicle charger at this property. So I did not find that this circumstance met the test by which we could grant an extension to that 12-month time period. So based on that, I believe that the legal non-conforming status has terminated both under the abandonment language as well as under the damage or destruction language, and given that the structure was not restored within 12 months. Happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you. As a part of that, Rebecca, is this information that we have tonight, is this, well, the most important question, is this new information that is not what you based your decision on.
No, and I apologize. It was, I believe it was uploaded to the license application that was denied. And so no, it is not new. I have seen it. I'm aware of it. It doesn't change my opinion.
That's the most important, but then also you said regardless of intent on one of your slides, is that kind of what this falls into, especially the first page, is that the intent or even beyond intent, the bookings that were ready to be fulfilled that couldn't, those cannot apply to that the use is happening.
Yeah, I mean, because the use didn't happen, the bookings were canceled. So I just want to make one last point. This is a difficult one. I think everyone in the room, they're all difficult. This one's especially difficult because I think there are circumstances that were well beyond the control of the property owner. I just wanted to point one thing out. The language speaks to regardless of intent, but I think that when you read the code, section 103D, that provides those 5 different circumstances by which legal nonconforming use terminates. None of those are, I mean, they're all sort of generally, well, abandonment of use could be something that was a choice by the property owner, but certainly damage or destruction to a structure is not a choice of a property owner. I believe that the intention of the code is to lay out circumstances by which, regardless of intention or choice, the use terminates. So, I think the abandonment clause explicitly has the regardless of intent language in there because that could be somebody can choose to cease operation for a period of time. But the other 4 criteria are not really typically something that a property owner would choose, such as damage or water damage to the property.
Great, thank you. Questions from?
Yeah, I have one. What do we use to inform the interpretation that using a property as a short-term rental does not include operating a short-term rental, in that, for all of these to get canceled, somebody had to do a bunch of work on behalf of a short-term rental. Someone was getting paid to do all these cancellations, to find new places for these people. Someone was operating the short-term rental. Even though someone wasn't staying, the short-term rental was in operation. So what piece of code, what language do we use to support the fact that, or the view that this is not using a short-term rental? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. And I think a similar discussion item came up during the last appeal. Certainly, short-term rental property owners often hire property managers. That's an ongoing contract. Typically, there's advertising that's occurring oftentimes year-round. Things are happening related to a short-term rental, but the use at the property is for the property to be considered a short-term rental use. Somebody has to be staying there as a short-term rental. And so if you recall from the last hearing, we talked about section 103D, the abandonment clause being extended for short-term rental type uses from 6 months to 12 months when we adopted the STR code. That is for what we call intermittent uses, and that was explicitly acknowledged that a short-term rental property is not operating as a short-term rental property, often not operating as a short-term rental property 365 days a year. It can be vacant, it could be someone's second home, vacation home, primary residence. Every day of that year, if the property owner is staying there or if it's vacant or being used for other guests, it would not be considered a short-term rental use at that time. So that use of that property sort of occurs intermittently throughout a year or throughout any period of time. So I don't believe it is not my opinion, and I don't think it is the intention of the code that having a rental contract with somebody, answering calls, advertising, canceling a property, something like that does not constitute use of that particular property as a short-term rental.
But we don't have that codified anywhere, what use means. Is that just an interpretation that's been utilized? Because I completely understand why some of those are not using the property, but some, I don't know, I'm just curious if that's actually written somewhere, defined somewhere.
If you're asking if there's somewhere in the language that says
what is use?
Using the property. The use is occurring. The short-term rental use of the property is occurring. And a short-term rental is the rental of the property as the use of the property as a lodging establishment for a period of time of less than 30 days. I mean, we can read the definition of how it's defined, but certainly advertising a property is not using the property. So I think that's a really good sort of just a good explanation for why any activity related to a short-term rental that might occur at some future date or some prior date does not constitute use of the short-term rental on that specific date. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, we can pull up.
You said that there is, yeah, would you mind? That'd be awesome.
As I'm pulling up the code, I would also just note that that in all of the appeals and in all of the decisions that we have made since the adoption of the short-term rental code, use of the property meant someone was staying in the property. So a significant change to that interpretation would have some pretty serious impacts to how we interpret the code and apply the program.
And I'm certainly not suggesting a carte blanche, like everything is using it, thinking about using it is using it. That's certainly not what I'm saying, but recognizing the amount of work it is to relocate a bunch of guests is a different kind of use that we haven't had to consider before, and meets a very different threshold, in my opinion. So that's why I'm pushing on this.
While Rebecca's still looking, I'd like to just bounce this maybe off you. Is work regarding a property that doesn't take place on the actual property a use of that property?
I guess I would argue yes. If
Even though
you're
you're-
actively working for, so if I owned a short-term rental, if I didn't have a rental company, I would be actively working to find replacement lodging for these people. But if you have a company, you're actively paying them to do work on behalf of this rental company. So in my opinion, yes, that's using the short-term rental. Even though it's not physically having someone stay there, you have a booking and you are physically doing work on behalf of that. So yeah, I think it is using it.
Maybe, but I would say that's a different type of use. Advertising, marketing, those are not lodging. They are a commercial use. I'll absolutely
Working on
give you that.
behalf of lodging, absolutely.
Well, yeah, but I mean, it's a different type of use ultimately.
I guess that's why I want to see the definition of what use is per our code.
Yeah.
'Cause that may help.
You ready, Rebecca?
Yeah, so I guess I mean, we don't have a definition of use. I think that is using, like, there's not like a broad definition of what a use is. So trying to think of
I guess another question maybe to speak to this is, well, no, I'm not even going to go there because I don't want that can of worms opened. Never mind.
I had can of worms all along on this with those type of thoughts.
Yeah.
What if during a recession you are advertising it, people maybe book, imagine a bad snow year and they all cancel. And it was never used for 12 months. I mean, and then that goes to, well, what's the intent of the code? Are there outside circumstances that meant the property wasn't used, but is that abandonment? I mean, and that, that's, or there are other reasons why that might happen, but even if they were booked, they were trying to, and their circumstances outside their control meant it didn't rent. I mean, it could have been because they were charging too much or any other number of reasons. But if you were just to open it up to these other things, where does that fall? I'm not, is it our intent that if there's not enough volume, well, then we want to get rid of it anyway. If there's not enough people are booking, and that's okay to lose that permission. I'm not answering that question, but that's that can of worms that is similar to what you're asking, but a little broader. And I'm not sure what the right answer is or what the real intent is at that point.
Yeah, and some of what's being said makes me feel like by asking questions about this particular appeal, I'm somehow blowing open every appeal, and every appeal is now going to be potentially like, and I don't think that's what I'm doing. I think I'm asking specific questions about this specific appeal that don't sit right with me.
I think it's important to understand what the intent of the code is, and if maybe that does or does not affect this particular one, it may cause future changes in the code or better interpretation in the future, or more detailed, what do we call it, when the executive has an official opinion that clarifies. We could get one of those.
Written interpretation.
Written interpretation. They're good questions. I have no problem with opening cans.
Are we debating now, or are we going to read?
No, we're waiting for an answer.
I actually have an answer. Want to apologize. So I was wrong. Our code defines use. It says the purpose of which land or structures thereon is designed, arranged, or intended to be occupied or used, or for which it is occupied, maintained, rented, or leased. That is how we define a use.
Pretty hardcore.
That kind of speaks to what I'm saying, honestly.
In the way that you like or don't like.
In a way that I don't think it says that you have to be using it. There's a warehouse that's been abandoned for 2 years. Someone can move in and start using it as a warehouse again immediately. Granted, we're not talking about something that's an illegal use, so that's a totally different thing. But it doesn't say that it's someone actually lodging there. It says that a use is, well, whatever.
That's not what I heard at all, so maybe we should have.
Interesting, yeah.
That's also.
Nor is it how we've applied abandoned uses around town for at least the 10 years I've been hearing about them. So
Say that again?
we haven't said that a warehouse that's just empty for 2 years is still a warehouse. We haven't made an interpretation like that either, that you were just kind of likening it to. We've said an outdoor storage use that isn't outdoor stored is abandoned, and a warehouse that isn't being used as a warehouse is abandoned. We've said that consistently about all uses, not just short-term rentals.
You're talking about just about like legally non-conforming uses?
Use. I feel like we're arguing about what the word up is here, so I feel like we're kind of losing sight of the conversation a little bit, but like.
No, I think
No,
the whole
use.
conversation for me
have-
is what the
Right.
definition of use is. So,
Zoned allowed outdoor storage, then whether it was occurring or not didn't matter.
yeah,
If it was an abandoned use, and so I think we are talking about legal non-conforming. You have,
Right.
it's called, et cetera. You have a outdoor storage in downtown, and it's a continued use. If they still wanted it to be outdoor storage, but they weren't storing anything on it for 12 months.
you don't have to get approved for it again. You just.
Yes, you would. At a legal, if it's legal non-conforming, you
If
would.
it's legal non-conforming, but if it's not legal non-conforming,
Like if it's used by right, it's used by
you
right.
could
When-
not use it.
Yes.
Even if it's a conditional
No,
use.
but see,
you
the
could not
point
use it
is,
here.
no, the critical thing is you still abandon it for that whole time. It's just because it's a use by right. If you start using it again, there's nothing to stop you.
It's not a use by right.
And it
That's
would-
conditional use.
It would
in
include a
places.
conditional use.
Yeah, and it wouldn't need to be approved again for someone new.
Saying if, we're talking hypotheticals here, saying even if it were a use by right.
Can I ask a
Do
different?
we want to listen to this definition again, or does anyone else want to hear it again?
I'd love to.
I'm ready to move on.
Well, I just navigated it away, so give me a minute and I'll read it again, but I don't want us to get on a sidetrack of outdoor storage, but I just want to clarify a conditional use, if it ceases to operate for a certain time period, it would absolutely need to be approved again before it could restart.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Even if the site was designed or intended to be used for outdoor storage. So I think, and I will go ahead and read the definition of use again, but I think we have to also recognize that the context in which that word is used throughout the code matters. So I think the idea of what is a legal nonconforming use absolutely matters. I apologize, I should have stayed on that page. The purpose for which land or structures thereon is designed, arranged, or intended to be occupied or used, or for which it is occupied, maintained, rented, or leased.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Yes.
Great.
Curious. The intent of the 12-month period when you're doing construction or rehabilitation or whatever it is, I assume is to expedite keeping it on the market or making it available. I guess my question would be, this looks like somewhere between 15 and 16 months from October 24 to February 26.
I think it was November to the following December.
13 months.
I shouldn't be the one answering that, sorry.
So we talked about the intent, 12 months, and the reason you couldn't grant an extension because a building permit was not pulled. Is that correct?
The criteria for the extension is two parts. One, it states that the structure is of a large scale and that the changes that are being made to the structure are required to comply with building code. That's a two-part test and it's an and, so both have to be met to grant the extension.
And you're saying.
And then it goes on to say that a building permit also has to be pulled within 12 months. Because if you're making changes to a structure to comply with building code, a building permit would be required to do so. So what my point in stating that there was no building permit is I don't think it meets the test for the extension. I believe that the purpose of the 12-month restoration period goes back to the purpose of the legal nonconforming section of the code, which is to eliminate these types of uses as quickly as possible. So my understanding of the 12-month reconstruction period is that if there is damage to a property and it can be restored and reconstructed within 12 months, then okay, we understand damage happens outside of someone's control. If it is of some extensive nature, so either exceeds 50% of the reconstruction costs or is of such an extent that it can't be completed within 12 months, then that's a circumstance where the code says this use terminates.
But that's the extent of damage, not the extent of project time. Okay?
It's both.
Actually, I don't think it is. It's the extensiveness of the damage is part of it. What I heard was that there are also insurance issues and other elements associated with completing the project in a more timely fashion. And so if it was 13 months versus 12 months, I don't see anything here that says, I know we're not supposed to talk about intent, but I don't see any intent not to rent this. And based on the documentation, I would say they tried to do that, or they had to cancel some of theirs.
So I'm going to respond to that by asking Rebecca a question to keep it in question format. Rebecca, is it correct that what we're doing whenever we review an appeal is to make a recommendation to council on whether staff's interpretation or the applicant's interpretation
Is more correct.
was the correct interpretation of the code?
Yes, that's one of the two criteria for approval of an appeal.
And that the specifics on whether insurance gets in the way of something was not did not impact whether or not staff felt that that met the true interpretation of the code.
Is that a question for me?
Sure.
I don't think I have the authority to make exceptions to the code.
I've got a question.
Whether or not you do or not, but that's what we're doing here. And I am speaking in conversation as opposed to questioning, but I'm putting that in context.
We got into a conversation and it was very confusing for me personally. I guess I have I'm trying to understand. I guess I'll ask the appellant. Was this work done expeditiously?
Sorry, you have to, it's like Lou had to.
As quickly as possible in Steamboat. And that's why she brought on the local in order to coordinate it so that it could go absolutely as quickly as possible. But as you saw the list of the trades that all had to be involved in it, that ended up being another. So you had the insurance challenge in the first place. And then you have that as the next one is trying to coordinate. Being the wife of an electrician, I completely understand the coordination piece of it. You come in to do your thing that day, but the drywaller hasn't done their thing. And so you're waiting on that person. And then that can all snowball in terms of the amount of time that it takes to actually get it done. But the goal was as quickly as possible. They were missing that rental revenue tremendously. For them, the goal was we want to get this, but they already lost, whatever that was, November and December of the previous year had to be, out for the entire next year. They were wanting to get that done. And I have one other comment, but it's not directly related to what you asked. Should I wait on that?
No, it's fine.
Okay. Just that when they did this, I don't want to call it a renovation because it wasn't. It was, getting the property back to being habitable. Everything that they did was for STRs. Like if they had wanted to do it just for their own personal home, they would have done different furniture. They wouldn't have, put in the EV charger. And granted, the EV charger did not slow anything down. That was like an addition, but it was just to show that money was being put in order to make this good for the community for a short-term rental property. And that was their goal in doing it. Wasn't for themselves. That was the entire intent the whole time, was to get it back on that rental market as quickly as they possibly could. And we could have rented it earlier, but it wouldn't have been up to anybody's standard. And I don't feel as if that's the way we really want to represent ourselves, is by hustling even, or going without, okay, sorry, well, the property's ready, but there's no oven. So we're going to go ahead and rent it to you. That's not a good look for anybody, is my opinion.
Thank you.
Can you help while you're already up here? You mentioned the list of trades, but could you give us more detail in the actual scope?
So that's all in a lot of detail in that service master. So basically they had, let me get my document here. They had to do, so the entire home had water about up to here for the main floor and the basement, which is the garage itself. So all the drywall was completely ripped out. Every single kitchen appliance was destroyed. All the flooring had to be completely redone. It had to be repainted. I believe that there was heating work that had to be done with it. But I'd say the best, I don't want to misspeak, but the service master list of items that had to get done it's very extensive and very well detailed in that report.
When I'm a little confused in trying to understand scope and time, and trust me, the context of my question, I understand trades and stacking and things never going as fast as you want. But at the same time, I feel like there's a combination here of somehow it was little enough work that no permits were pulled, and somehow it was big enough work that it would take as long to complete as building a house from scratch. I'm trying to find out where we are in between those two
Yeah.
extremes.
Yeah.
So that would really help to kind of describe a little more.
And I don't know if the woman who handled all of that, Robin locally that started that February doing it, I don't know if there's a way to she did write a statement that I did include in the documentation. I think it is in your packet today because I believe I got it to Rebecca early enough. That was her sort of synopsis of it. There's also a list of receipts on that one for the different trades that were involved for that particular time. The owner did say that it was not a complete list of receipts, and I've been trying to get that from Robin, but I've not gotten that yet.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Yeah, of course.
I've got one for you too.
Yeah.
Is Robin like a licensed general contractor, or does she have like experience in this industry, or is she just a random local that the owner knows?
No, she was recommended by a local realtor who does a lot with, I think she's basically, I don't know if interior decorator is
She's an
her.
interior designer.
Yeah, interior designer. I didn't know the exact title.
Okay.
She's worked with a lot of properties and worked with a lot of people I know in the trades, but this was my first experience working with her.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
One more question for you. Well, I have a question. There may be more. During the process, to the best of your knowledge, you, Robin, the property owner, were you aware of this 12-month ticking clock? Was there any sort of what was the mindset? Like, we got to get this done. Obviously ski season was coming. Was there like a ticking clock other than the desire for the income?
I don't know. I don't have a solid answer to that one. I was brought in very, very late in the process once they decided that, okay, this is getting close enough to rent it again. So let's get on that. I was honestly taken aback when I went to apply for the renewal of the permit and was denied it. I didn't know when the last booking was. I had not looked into when the previous last booking was. I guess because of what had happened, it just didn't even occur to me. And I'm really on top of that with all my properties with the permitting process. This is just such a new experience that I was not aware.
Thank you.
Sure.
Rich.
For Rebecca, what is the criteria for a large scale?
I think that is can be interpreted by the decision maker. So my interpretation of that, I think, what did I say? This was about 1,500 square feet. In this town, in my opinion, a 1,500 square foot structure is not of a large scale. That's my opinion. There is nothing further in the code to define that.
So you don't think that it could be in large scale as compared to the property? Obviously you could say $130,000 or whatever the dollar value was. If the Grand had to do that you wouldn't even think twice about what that impact was. But to a single home or a single homeowner, you would not think that would be a large scale. That I'm trying to understand.
So the language about the structure being of a large scale is not related to the cost. So it's my reading of the code says that if there's damage to a structure housing a legal non-conforming use, that there's 12 months to repair that damage without terminating the use. It then goes on to state that the planning director can grant an extension to that 12 months under the circumstance that the structure is of a large scale. So I read that to say, I understand the code is attempting to say that, acknowledge that larger structures would take longer to repair than something smaller that could be done in 12 months. So I guess maybe I would ask for clarification on your question.
I guess.
I think the
what you
Grand
showed
would
on
be
the
a
screen
structure of a large scale.
I'm sorry.
I was just, your example of the Grand, I mean, I would say that is a
That
large
was one, but
scale structure.
what you showed didn't say structure. It just said that, could you bring that back up?
And it,
Structure is of a large scale.
language is in,
I was trying to find it, but
it is in, the full complete language is on page 3 of 5 of the staff report. So it's
structure is of a large-
3.3,
okay, I got it.
bolded number 5.
I got
That
it.
is straight from the code.
Okay, so there is that. So I did remember seeing it on the screen. So with did you look at assessed value or some other, how did you determine that the dollars spent on reconstruction, for lack of a better word, was not of 50% of value?
I didn't do a lot of research on that. I just know what it costs to build in this town. And I don't think that you're going to build a 1,500 square foot 3-story townhouse for $260,000 or less. So I didn't do it. Yeah, I didn't do any extensive research on that. That was a gut check. And I didn't feel that that section, that part of that or statement, that first criterion, I don't think it was met. So I would not, if that was the only part, then I would not say that that section applied and terminated the use. It's the second part of that or statement that talks about reconstruction and repairing the damage within the 12 months. And that does not come with a percentage of reconstruction costs along with it.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I've got one more. I kind of wanted to go back a little bit to Lou and Brian's conversation and ask Rebecca, do you feel that it's in the spirit, in the language of the code surrounding LNC abandonment to attempt to eliminate those uses in undesirable locations?
Can you repeat the beginning of your statement?
Do you think it's in the spirit, in the language of the code surrounding LNC abandonment to try to eliminate those uses in undesirable areas?
I think the intent, I mean, there's no doubt about it, that the code includes very clear statements of purpose and intent. So section 103A lays out the purpose and intent of that full section of the code. It states that the purpose is to A, limit the number and extent of nonconforming uses, B, prohibit the enlargement of nonconforming uses, C, prohibit reestablishment of nonconforming uses after abandonment, and D, further the goals and policies of the community plan and other adopted plans. Subsection 2 of 103A includes the following intent statement. It reads, the intent of this section is to apply standards that will eliminate legal nonconforming uses as speedily as possible. So that is, there's no interpretation needed there. I think the code's pretty clear as to what it's trying to accomplish.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not asking a question.
We're almost there anyway. So
Oh,
are
okay.
there any other questions?
I feel like last time we talked about this, there was some discussion about that appellant was in a red zone. There's some discussion about a hardship, and it didn't apply to that. But I'm wondering, is there any language, applicable language here about undue hardship?
I think, no, there's no language in this section of the code about a hardship. I think the code acknowledges that damage or destruction to a property is likely a hardship. And then it establishes some parameters around how the code treats that, what allowance for repair, repair of the structure, continued use, continued non-conforming status of the use. It puts some guardrails around that. So there's the language that I've shared with you is the only applicable language in the code. Did I answer your question? Okay.
Any other questions? Okay. We don't have any public comment for this, so we'll skip public comment and first come back to if you had any other follow-up or anything else you wanted to add. But you got to get back up again, I'm sorry.
Not really. I mean, I think I've sort of said everything. I did look back in here if you did want me to go through in more detail what the extent of the damage was, therefore, than what the repairs would have been.
Sure, I can ask it as a question just to kind of define, so you don't have to just randomly talk. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm looking at it, for example, I've got page 34 pulled up of the 101 page thing, which
Yeah.
was extensive and helpful. It mentions things that sound like building code things. So if anything, I have a question as to why a building permit wasn't pulled, but I'm not going to go down that road because that's not the hat we're wearing.
Completely.
tonight.
Yeah.
But demo an exterior wall, boy, that's I mean, that's item number 2. That's a building code thing. We've got there was plumbing in here. There was some new light fixtures. There's drywall in the garage which needs to be inspected for its screwing and taping. It's got that fire separation from the rest of the house. We've got a lot of building code things listed, but also somehow the demo of the exterior wall was only $100, and there's nothing that talks about that it was rebuilt. So maybe that wasn't demoed. So I just didn't feel like I actually understood from this list what the scope was. So now you know why I'm confused. Maybe you can add.
I completely do. And I wish that I had had more involvement at that point in time and or that the owner was able to be a part because they were, or the other people that were actually involved in that piece of it. So I could give you, because I don't want to speak on something that I don't know factually. And so I wish I could, but I don't have any of those details, unfortunately.
Okay, well, no worries. And I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah. Yep. So basically, I mean, the only, I want to keep this just as factual as possible, but I guess from a, community member standpoint, what I can't quite understand is, if they had those reservations in place that were intended by that owner to be fulfilled. And if those had been fulfilled, then we would never have been out of compliance because of that December 26th to 31st date, and then our first reservation coming in on December 14th. So I guess there's just that question of definition of the reservation. And there are times when, in my business that we'll have somebody will book a reservation, they just don't show up. But nobody's going in to make sure that they're there in order to call that the use of the reservation, right? And so these people, they were forced to cancel. They were moved elsewhere within Steamboat. So that's money that was owed to that owner for that reservation and then was moved to another owner in Steamboat, but was it kind of initially intended for this one, and then with something completely out of their control was forced to be moved elsewhere. So that's the piece of it that I just don't necessarily understand and wish there was clearer definition for, and potentially some, I don't want to say wiggle room with, that's the wrong word, but just the ability to have some flexibility when a situation like that that's so out of somebody's control. And I guess what I don't understand is if the goal of these parameters is to get rid of as many of the legal non-conforming status properties as possible, then why is there the lottery process for that zone? If we're trying to kind of move those out, then we have that same zone that there's a lottery process for. So let's say she loses this permit, then there's a chance somebody else will get it in that same zone. That just doesn't really make sense to me. So I think that's about it.
Okay, thank you.
Rebecca, can
Final
you
call.
clear that up a little bit? Because you're not taking new license applications for the yellow zone, correct?
So I have 2 follow-up comments. So on the lottery, this is subzone B3. That subzone is currently over allocated with short-term rental licenses. So with any reduction in licenses, it won't automatically go to a lottery because we wouldn't advertise for a lottery until such time as the licenses that are issued drop down below the cap. So we have run 2 lotteries that none of them have been for B3, and B3 continues to be well over the cap. The other thing I just wanted to mention is I just wanted to be really clear about our decision that the staff's decision that the use has terminated per section 103D is based on 2 of the 5 circumstances by which a legal nonconforming use terminates. So I believe that there are 2 bases for that decision. It's not just the one or the other. I think that there are 2 code provisions that have terminated this legal nonconforming use. And I think that was clear. So even if, we were to try to count the canceled reservations, I still think that this particular circumstance does satisfy the termination under section 103D5, that it wasn't restored within 12 months. So I think you have to look at both of those.
And just to help follow up to your first point is that not only can these yellow zones be over allocated currently because there's a lot of legal nonconforming, but that the difference between a yellow and a red zone is that there can be some, at least as it was defined, there can be a mix of short-term rental versus long-term rental in those spaces, but that density of short-term rental should be reduced to meet that goal mix, right? Tell me if I'm wrong, Rebecca, that's technically a question, but that's kind of the answer to.
Yes, that's correct. The intent of the yellow zone is to allow a certain amount of short-term rentals within each of those subzones. There are 6 of them, so they all have different caps. It was based on sort of the context of the area, the character of the area, what Planning Commission and Council thought was appropriate for that area.
Any other final questions? Okay, I'll close our public portion and come to commissioners for discussion and motion.
I'll discuss it. I'll say it again. I hate these. In this case, I do believe there are unique circumstances. There's a catastrophic event. Could this have been done quicker? Should have a permit have been pulled? Yeah, I think probably on some of this. I don't know why, but so it took 13 months instead of 12 months, but everything is out of the owner's control on this. I don't see any levers that say you can make this happen quicker. And so there are a lot of questions in my mind. If we can extend it for a month based on, whether it's a large structure or is it a complex construction job? It doesn't have to be large, it could be just complex. It could be so much material. If there's 3 feet of water in a building, that's a totally different game than, normal construction. It probably takes 2 months just to dry everything out so that you can actually do something. So I'm tending to lean with the appellant in this case.
I just want to help make sure that your thoughts are on the record as well as possible. So I'm going
Yeah.
to challenge them.
Okay.
You saying that your reason for the applicant's interpretation of the CDC being better is because
I think
there's no way to do construction jobs faster than 13 months. And so therefore the 12 months just shouldn't apply?
No.
I'm putting words in your mouth, but I'm
No.
giving you the opportunity to state that better,
From-
just to make sure you know where I'm coming from.
From my perspective, could it have been done faster? Sure, I'm positive of it. But the basis for not adding the extra month is very interpretive. It's not spelled out. Is it $130,000 or whatever it is? Size is not, it's 1,500 square foot. I think this is probably a townhouse or a condo of some sort. So size, that's very interpretive of what's big and what's little. It's complexity that matters most. And this sounds like there was a lot of activity taking place. So I'm saying that, you know, if we had the opportunity to extend it a month, but we didn't use that opportunity because we determined the size was an important factor. Then, you know, and we interpreted that size itself was, I don't know, it's not numeric. 1,500 square feet, it's a size. It could be big. For 300, someone who has a 360 square foot home, that's a 1,500 square foot's huge. So that's my concern about this. You know, if this construction had dragged on for 2 or 3 years, then maybe that would be a different situation. Again, I can't answer a question why it appears that building permits should have been pulled on this. You know, I don't think any of us have any idea why they wouldn't be.
I
Right?
just want to make sure, and again, I know I'm putting words in your mouth, but I'm trying to help solidify it. And I'm disagreeing with you for these reasons, but tell me why I'm wrong. The and statement is size, which I disagree with you on, but I understand your reasoning, your sound reasoning on it. And that it gets done within this
12-month
period of time and requires building code related updates. Where do you see justification for that is better on the applicant side than on staff side? If you do, that's okay. Mostly the reason I'm pushing back is because I don't see how they've met that. I'm going to use staff's word because I thought it was very perfect for this scenario. It doesn't pass that test. There's nothing that we've seen here in presentation form and quasi-judicial form tonight that says that this required building code review or that there was in order for that extension. If you don't get that extension, then there's a time limit. The time limit can be 4 months. 12 months is the max. We're saying that this is a big enough nature, but easy enough to repair that you're getting it done within this time period, or else you've abandoned the use at that point. And so how are they not falling outside of that defined scope on what is not abandoned at that point? I'm sorry, I'm making you answer for it. You started, so you're my way to continue the conversation.
I would lean on intent on this because I don't see this as, you know, the dog ate my homework excuse that we typically see here. There's a catastrophic event happened out of control of the owner to repair it. Like I said, we don't know the extent of this construction. And I am comfortable saying that, we can argue forever whether 1,500 square foot is big or little. I'm choosing to say that it's sizable for the types of units that we're talking about here.
And I don't want to give you too much back and forth, but just because that gives me a chance to help explain myself as well, is that I think you were very correct when you just said, we don't know the extent.
Yes.
We do know that it took 13 months, but we don't know why it took 13 months. We don't even know exactly what was done and why it took 13 months. And I'll tell you that I have a lot of experience in expecting a project that doesn't need a building permit to be done way before 13 months. So where's the evidence that actually points me in the direction that that's likely? I don't see any evidence that points me that that was likely beyond their control. That's where we're different, and that just gives me the chance to describe my point.
It's a fair comment, but maybe it's I'm being subjected to empathy factors. I don't know, Brian.
Well, and empathy is tough in these situations because it is a catastrophic thing that was very frustrating for them to have happened. Frustrating is too gentle a word. It was catastrophic.
Yes, it's catastrophic.
I want to push back a little bit on we don't know the scope of what happened. I mean, looking through the invoices and the photos included, and the appellant's comments, I feel like I have a pretty good idea of the scope of what happened. Maybe not down to what they did with the exterior wall, but there was significant mold remediation done, drywall work done, all new flooring, all new paint, and so on the time frame, I feel like it's 13 months. a little long. Yeah, probably a little long. Should they have pulled a permit? Yep, probably should have pulled a permit. I don't think 13 months was unreasonable for a $130,000 project.
Just to be fair, I mean, drywall is like a 3-week process and flooring is a 2-week process, probably less on 1,500 square feet, just a little insight. We're far away from 13 months.
If you've got the contractors there, and that's not considering all the remediation that happens. But I think that that's like getting out in left field where it's like, it doesn't matter. Our job is to decide whether the appellant, I can never get that word right, whether these guys or these guys are interpreting the code more correctly. And you said earlier, Brian, that you felt like we were trying to define the word up. And maybe if up was in the code, maybe we would have to define that. And I would hope that it's in the code. But I just want to read, because our job is to interpret code, I want to read a couple of pieces of code one more time, because this is what I'm basing I'm going to support the appellant. Thank you. God. And it's because I think that their interpretation of code in this case, I don't think that they abandoned the use. So the CDC, the definitions, rules of interpretation, the very first section says that words, phrases, terms, and uses defined in the CDC shall be given the defined meaning. So if it's defined in the CDC, we use that definition. And then it says if it's not, but it's defined in municipal code, then use that definition. And if it's not defined anywhere else, then it's like the common definition. So we're not using the common definition of use. We're using the CDC definition of use, because that's what the CDC tells us to do. So the CDC definition of use is the purpose for which land or structures is designed, arranged, or intended to be occupied or used, or for what it is occupied, maintained, rented, or leased, or for which it is occupied, blah, blah. So unfortunately, that makes this really tough when the definition of abandonment says regardless of intention, because use includes the word intention as part of the definition of how a use is defined. Like that right there is very confusing, but I think there is no reason for us to believe that that anything about the structure that we're talking about, that the purpose never changed. The purpose of that structure was always to be used as this short-term rental, evidenced by the fact that they had to move a bunch of people who had made rentals. They did a bunch of work and designed the structure, redesigned the work that was done for the same purpose. So I don't think that it was ever abandoned per the definition of the CDC. So I think that their interpretation is more accurate based in code. So
I think that was well laid out. Can I argue based on exactly
Absolutely.
what you just said, just
Yeah.
for rounded conversation?
Mhm.
I think what you exactly just spelled out is what my point was, is that the definition is clarified in whether or not a legal nonconforming use is abandoned. So when they say it is this, and then if it is abandoned, it is this regardless of intent, that is a refined definition based on the specific way that it is being used. So you gave both, and the both is what's critical. Regardless of intent is what matters.
So what did the purpose of that structure change to whilst being renovated?
Can we go down I'm going to be a sarcastic hypothetical
Yeah.
just for the sake of rounding the conversation. It changed to a firehouse. Prove me wrong, right? Like that's the whole point.
I think I can prove you wrong. I can prove that within that 12-month period, the purpose was to be a short-term rental.
I didn't see it used as one any more than I saw it used as a firehouse.
The purpose of it was because it was rented to these people and they had to cancel it. But the purpose of that structure during these dates, regardless of what else happened in between, regardless of what the scope of the construction was or how hard it was to get contractors on site, the purpose for these dates remained as an STR.
But it's still intent, which is specifically included in the LNC.
The purpose, which is different. If it's literally rented as an STR, the purpose
But it's
of
not
that
rented.
building-
It was intended to be
It
rented.
was rented and then they had to, it was not intended. It was rented.
It was intended unless they were paid.
If it was
Something's
listed-
not
it was-
rented unless you receive payment.
Was listed, then it's intended to be rented. If it was rented, the purpose was that it was a rental.
But it's not rented until you're paid.
I don't think that I think that that's searching for a no when it comes to like,
I disagree. I think that's like
Documented rent.
legally the definition
Well, actually,
of a rental or a lease.
if I recall, appellant indicated that they were paid, and then they had to pay the other people. I gotta ask him.
Sure.
One thing that just all made me think about is that we listed it significantly before December in order to get it booked, but bookings just don't always come in that quick. And that was my point in saying that we incentivized, we gave 20% to the first 6 bookings that came in on both of the major rental sites in order to try to entice somebody to come in. November is just not a popular month in Steamboat. You know, it's not a time with which you get a lot of bookings. So it's not necessarily that we could not have had somebody in there before December. It's that we didn't get a booking in there before December. It was habitable before December. So it's just, and it's another piece of the puzzle when it comes down to, was it the date that it was booked? Because it was booked, the date that like the reservation came in for that December booking was significantly before December. So that would have made it potentially even within that year when we say, because we collect money the day that that person books. And once they're within 30 days of arrival, they're not guaranteed a refund. So that's just another little side point that's, I don't know if it makes a difference, but.
Okay, thank you.
I guess I just want to clarify that if there were not actual bookings during those 12 months, I don't think that we could prove that there was purpose. But I think that you can prove that the purpose of the structure within a 12-month period the purpose never left. And the purpose is the definition of a use. So maybe I don't need to say.
Nope, you've made your point. We're going to be talking in circles, I think, if we keep.
I think
going
so
back
too.
and forth.
And I think the purpose of the code surrounding this is to remove these uses wherever and whenever possible, explicitly.
So you just get to ignore the definition of use?
No, use is also defined in the LNC abandonment.
I don't think it is.
I mean, not as like a little use defined, but it's saying excluding the intent
Regardless of.
regardless.
Any other discussion?
I'll go. Yeah, unless I hear Rebecca agreeing with your definition, then I think those other things we talked about also would fall under that umbrella of how you interpret use.
What other things? Sorry, I didn't understand.
Well, like what if somebody booked and then canceled, but they didn't show you the cancellation? You would be saying, oh, they booked it and they intended to. Well, maybe that's not even a real booking. I was just thinking I was going to create a business that offer people free bookings so that way they can show use of it every 12 months. By your definition. Hope somebody heard me and that might be popping up in the future. Anyway, I was going with what Brian had alluded to, that possibly the amount of damage should have had a permit pulled. And by the code's intent, it would take longer and we should definitely look at it. But what we've talked about before, just like with intent of rental, if they don't do it legally, it doesn't count. So even if they intended it to be short-term rental, but they didn't pay the taxes on it, we don't count that as a legal booking. So that goes even beyond use. Okay, so their intent was they even did short-term rental. But if they didn't do it legally, it doesn't count. And part of what they may not, if they had pulled permits, building permits, we would not be talking about this because I think staff would say, oh, it required a building permit and we should consider an extension of the 12 months. They didn't pull the building permit. And, I would tend to agree that that's a crux for me. It's a technical one because, I think the amount of work the amount of work necessary may have taken longer than 12 months and should have been given consideration, but they didn't pull a building permit. And it specifically calls out they have to do that. And so I'm going to have to agree with staff all the way.
Okay. Any other discussion? Yeah, I'll jump in. I mean, as Rebecca pointed out, there were several tests, right? There were two separate, almost unrelated tests. One was the time period, and the other was one was the or, one was the and, right? I'm not going to read it too much. I don't think it passes, or I think staff interpreted both correctly as it is laid out in the code, and that's the final thing. It's not. When I say that, I'm not speaking from empathy or understanding of catastrophic mistake. I'm also not speaking from trying to assume that they did everything they could to build it faster. There are unknowns there just as much as there are. It is in as much as we are not meant to follow on how much we agree with it being catastrophic. But the code, they're not meeting the intent or the actual use, right? Because regardless of intent, they're not meeting the actual use within 12 months, and they're not meeting the construction being done within 12 months, and they didn't get an extension for more than 12 months. And it's not large, in my educated opinion. So it is not meeting the test in almost every aspect, despite how unfortunate the damage was. So that's why I would be supporting staff's interpretation tonight.
I really connect with Lou's comments earlier. Net, like I wish the code accounted for catastrophic events. I wish there was something in there about undue hardship, but I haven't been able to find it. And then it was the building permit that got me over the edge to support staff.
That's a lot of good conversation. Anybody want to make a motion one way or another? No?
Yeah, sure. Finding the right language. The Planning Commission recommends denial of appeal PL 2026-0083 and uphold the planning director's decision of legal nonconforming use abandonment related to PL 2022-0343 at 1160 Nature's Lane.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other final discussion? Okay, great then. I'll call for a vote.
Aye.
No.
Aye.
Aye.
No.
Aye.
And that recommendation motion passes 4-2. Thank you for your time tonight.
You look.
We have maybe a director's report and some minutes. Does anybody need a break first since it's already 8 o'clock, or should we power through those?
Just like a quick one.
Yeah, 5 minutes. Is that okay?
That's still a big bar.
Nice.
All right. Somebody left the treat box out.
Right.
Hydrated.
Good girl. That's not right.
Make sure.
Were you missing anybody? Says it on there.
It says we're on air. Are we
We're on a break thing, disappeared.
unmuted and ready?
I think so.
Yeah. All right. Great. So I think that at this point where, do we have a director's report tonight?
I don't have anything to report tonight. Thanks.
Okay, not a problem. Then we just have some meeting minutes to go through. Our first one is from November 13th. Does anybody have any changes or is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve meeting minutes from November 13th, 2025.
Second.
Give me a motion and a second. Are we all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great. Our next one would be for public hearing minutes for November 20th, 2025. Same thing, any comments, changes, or is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor for this?
Aye.
Aye.
Great. Lastly, we have public hearing minutes for February 12th of 2026. Same thing, is there any changes, comments, or is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second? We have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And that is approved as well. In which case, somebody want to make a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right, motion and a second. All in